Good afternoon. Welcome to Geneva. We are happy to see you here today at the HNPW. This session is about digitalization and artificial intelligence. And this is one of the strategic objectives of IMPACT. IMPACT is a network of 11 strategic members and partners, and we have adopted a collaborative and coordinated approach, and we are developing tools to support national coordination mechanisms related to customs and importation processes for disaster relief goods and equipment. The overall objective is to address the different challenges in importation and custom clearance. And with this in mind, we have developed a strategy with six objectives. And one of them is to support the use of technology and other systems that enhance and streamline cross-border processes for humanitarian aid. And this is why we are here today during this session on digitalization and artificial intelligence. To do that, we are working with our core members of IMPACT, 3 core members in particular, International Humanitarian City, where we celebrated the 20th anniversary this morning, UNCTAD, the United Nations Conference for Trade and Development, and the Logistics Cluster, who now host IMPACT working group since last year, but also with ESOP's initiative hosted by Welthungerhilfe in Germany. So IHC has established the Humanitarian Logistic Data Bank that provides humanitarian community with a common database platform on humanitarian aid stock and flows to enhance emergency preparedness and response. UNCTAD, so the United Nations Conference for Trade and Development, has developed ASICUDA, the automated system for customs data that is implemented in more than 100 countries in the world with customs administration. And together with them, ASIREC was developed, the automated system for relief consignment that facilitates and expedites the processing of international relief during humanitarian crises, natural disasters, and complex emergencies. ESOPs, then, hosted by Welthungerhilfe, created Stockholm. Stockholm stands for Stocks of Humanitarian Organizations Logistics Mapping. It is a platform that compiles information of relief items prepositioned at the national level. Last but not least, Log.IE, developed by the Global Logistic Cluster, that collects, analyze, and share humanitarian logistic information during an emergency. How these tools can work together? How can we enhance the collaborative approach that IMPACT is advocating for? How to support the paradigm shift in truly giving national decision makers access to the data they need in a centralized and easy way to access and to make informed decisions. This is why we are here today. The panelists that I will introduce in a second will present how these tools can support humanitarian actors and decision makers by bringing together all the existing data to support any relief operations in the readiness phase, in the response phase, and in the preparedness phase. So let me introduce you to the 3 panelists. So we have Florent Chen from ESOPs and project manager of ESOPs. We have Jehad from the International Humanitarian City. Sorry, his first name is difficult to pronounce. and Konstantin Schuta from UNCTAD, and customs expert in UNCTAD. Florent, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginie. So yes, I'm just going to move to the next step. So this is the idea of the presentation today. We're going to show how those 4 platforms interact together and can provide support to the national decision makers, mostly at country level, but not only, through a scenario based on Madagascar that I'll show you in a minute. And we'll go through those 3 phases: readiness, response, and preparedness. We've started with readiness instead of the response phase, just as a way of changing. And by definition, in a cycle, you can start anywhere you want. So we started with the readiness phase. We just wanted to start also by highlighting a few key aspects of the different projects that are present here in this session. You can see on the humanitarian data bank the different aspects that are coming out. And one of the things that we can, one of the reasons we started to engage on this joint presentation together, as you can see, there's quite a few terminologies that come back around preparedness, joint initiative, localization, and coordination, information sharing, etc. So we have all those 4 projects, and the idea is to make the life of decision making easier by compiling or making all those data available, not only in our respective platform, but also in a centralized place. And we'll have the log cluster, log AI online to show us that in a minute. So this is the scenario based. I don't know if Colonel is online. Sophia, can you, or Colonel, if someone is online? The idea of the scenario is of a cyclone coming from the Indian Ocean. And as you can see, the cyclone has a bit of a weird path because normally they come from the northeast to the southwest. But as we've seen in the last few years, mostly in the Pacific, we had now cyclone category 5 going all over the place, and they come from one place and they go around Fiji and they turn around and they hit Tonga and they come back. So I think this whole idea of predictability, even in regards to the natural disaster that we could rely on, is also disappearing. So one of the reasons we've put this scenario in place is also to highlight the fact that this predictability is going. Do we have Colonel Fali online? Not yet? Okay. Yeah. I think he may need the link. Huh? He may need the link. So the scenario is a category 3 cyclone traveling from Australia, from the Indian Ocean, currently located halfway towards Madagascar. So we have a bit of a lead time to start organizing a few things, and that's one of the things we will talk about in a minute. It is expected to land in 5 days with a strengthened force as a potential category 5. The probable landing point is on the northern part of the East Coast, and it will just brush the East Coast further north. Potential affected population is a bit over 1 million people. And for the sake of the exercise, because this whole exercise is mostly focusing on stocks and how we can all collaborate into making stock available not only at country level, but at regional level and through the custom facilitation process, we decided to streamline this exercise through focusing on 10 relief items, which are the one you see on the screen: blanket, bucket, hygiene kits, IHK kits, kitchen set, mosquito net, mass storage unit, solar lantern, tarpaulins, and water container. We could have picked up any others. Those came out after discussion with some of the national representatives as the usual suspects that we always use everywhere. And so there's a good basis to start looking at this scenario. Again, we could have picked up others, but this one were a good representation of what we need to do. Okay, so one of the reasons we wanted to do this presentation together, it came from a few things. We had a separate presentation last year between the International City and ESUPS and the Stockholm platform. And then we realized that basically we are talking the same language. We are just doing it at different level. For our side at the national level, for their side at the regional and global level. And obviously there was a need to connect. And obviously that led us to join the discussion as well with Impact and Azirec in regards to the custom systems they're putting in place. One of the points we realized where the reason we wanted to move into that joint approach is because of the gaps we've identified. And again, we could have identified many more, but the main ones are lack of centralized data and visibility on stocks. So as you know, everybody pre-positions stocks at national level, but nobody talks to their neighbor. So UNICEF doesn't know what the Red Cross has. The Red Cross doesn't know what International Medical Corps has. And generally the government doesn't have any idea of whoever has what, which makes it difficult for them to be in charge of a response when they don't own their data, what's happening in their country. So a lack of centralized data, a lack of analysis on the basis of this centralized information. So we all do our own analysis, but having something a bit more complete and centralized was also necessary. And also a lack of data on relief item available and dispatched. So that was the 3 main drivers for us to start putting this presentation together. Feel free to join in anytime you want.
Online. I will see the link now.
Okay. Colonel Fali, are you online? Sophia?
I still don't see him in the participants list, but if he appears, I will maybe give you a sign, or he can
Wave at me. Yeah. Thank you. All right. So we're going to start with the first phase of the exercise of the scenario, which is the readiness phase. And then as we go along, I will pass by that. So the idea is that here you can follow up on the PowerPoint of the presentation, and here we'll move to the different platforms. We'll do an artisanal way. We'll switch the laptop over to the next users because it was a bit complicated to set up. So the first thing I would like to show you, in the case of Madagascar, this is the Stockholm platform. This is the stock mapping part, which you can see here on the map. And one of the things you can do here is select the country you want. So in that case, if I select Madagascar, because that's the case of what we do, you will see all the stock we collected in the country with the support of the BNGRC and the Global Logistic Cluster Preparedness Unit, who were on the field trying to coordinate this exercise. And here from the list we've agreed, you can select the blanket, you can select the bucket, you can select your water container, for instance, here they are, etc., etc. And then whatever you see on the map here will turn into an aggregated stock report on the right part of your screen. You can, of course, add additional columns. So if you want further detail, you can get the dispatch of your water container per agency here, or here, sorry. Water container from the Direction Régionale de l'Eau, the Red Cross, HI, etc. So all the details are in the backhand of the platform, and you can make them available by adding extra column here for your report. Anything you've put in your report, you can download the data, and you will have all this information on an Excel spreadsheet that from where you can filter, you can play with it, you can do any kind of things you want. So we can look at this stock from the item we need. What we can also do, in the case of this exercise, going back to Madagascar, if you can see the screen over there, you can actually use the polygon function, and we can say that the cyclone is going to come that way. And then when you do that and close the loop, it will tell you what is the stock you have in this specific area. Okay, so from that point on, what it allows you to do, and especially if you are in charge of making decision in terms of the response to come, you know you have a cyclone on the way, you may want to look at how much stock you have in the potential affected area to respond, and you also know now what is the stock you have in the rest of the country, which is what I wanted to show you here. So just to give you an idea, I wanted to show you how it works, but basically this is a summary of the situation. So you can see the 10 relief items. You can see in the orange column, what are the quantity in the potential affected area. So that's what we have in the Stockholm platform. You know what stock you have in the area. And as I said, you can get further detail on the download part to make sure to know who has what and etc. You can see now what is the stock you have across the rest of the country. So you can see, for instance, on your tarpaulin, you have a bit less than 5,000 in the affected area, but you have close to 20,000 or 18,000 in the rest of the country. And the idea that we promote here is that we all know that stock management can be a bit of a complicated matter. We are discussing with different partners also who are facing similar situation with UNHRD, with whom we had a meeting earlier last week. And this idea of stock rotation and the fact that some items are not rotating enough. And so one of the ideas we promote here is that in such a situation, there's an opportunity to dispatch the stock from the rest of the country, turn that around, bring it to the affected area, giving you more time to respond faster with more items to cover more people until extra items come from the regional hubs or other source that we'll see in a minute. So here you have an idea of the gap you can see between what's available at the affected area and what's available in the rest of the country. So, sorry? He's online. Colonel Fali, are you online? Colonel?
Just for me, is online.
Yes,
He is
yes,
online.
yes.
Ah, good afternoon. Good to have you with us.
Good afternoon. I'm so sorry because I was finishing another meeting, and then I am very glad to join. And I'm so sorry for all the audience for me not to be among you. But with the technology, it seems like I am here and I am with you also. So very proud to be taken as an example in this very important presentation, joint presentation that we have prepared with his and the other colleagues also. So yeah, please keep on and move forward, and I will jump inside whenever it is needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. Just for the audience, Colonel Fali is the head of the Bureau National de Gestion des Risques et des Catastrophes, BNGRC, or NDMO for a more common acronym, in Madagascar. Colonel, would you have a few words to say in regards to your capacity or your possibility to have an overview of the stock in Madagascar when you're facing such a situation as the one we have in the scenario?
Sure. So as the main department which is in charge of coordinating all the action of disaster management here in Madagascar, we have developed tools to have all the prepositioning activities that is being doing by all the humanitarian actors. We have already the chance to develop and then have the tools that has been developed by ISOPS last year. We tried to begin to implement it in our way of working here to take a decision during the crisis management. Especially last year, we have had 6 cyclones. 2 of them were category 4 cyclone, and this year we have also the cyclone Freddy, which was supposed to be one of the very historical cyclone that has ever passed in the Indian Ocean. So of course, we have tools to follow up all the prepositioning items in Madagascar. And the items that has been chosen here is one of, let's say, the main deployment of sectorial actors in the field. And for the use of the exercise, we tried to just choose some of them in order to be, let's say, at ease to use it with the joint presentation today. So yes, of course, all of them is very, very useful in the very first beginning of deployment, and then the early action in the field just after the cyclone pass.
Thanks, Colonel. Feel free to jump in at any point, of course. Moving on with the presentation, Sophia. Yeah, thank you. So in regards to what Stockholm can provide, and I just want to give a precision, the Stockholm platform was not developed as a response tool mechanism. The idea of prepositioning is that everybody has stock in their facility. Disaster comes, you open the door, you distribute what you have, and the information you have in your stock are out of date until you get the replenishment and re-update the data. So the tool is not designed for response as such, much more as a preparedness activity, where it allows partners to sit around the table and define a better way to do a joint prepositioning strategy as a preparedness measure. However, in the case of a disaster like this one that give you a bit of time, it can be used to start redispatching potential stock across the country in order to increase your first 2 days of response capacity. John? Okay. So first of all, you can, of course, evaluate the available stock quantity and location in the country. It can look at option to redispatch the stock across the country to better prepare. And obviously, there would be some advantages of that. That's what we believe in terms of stock rotation, in terms of organizing, pooling transport from one location to another. And obviously, by pooling transport, there are side consequences as this with saving money, saving carbon emission, etc. It also opened up an opportunity, which is another discussion we're having with some other partner for update stock quantities in place where it was departed, but also to look at potential joint replenishment for the same reason of buying together, joint procurement, joint transportation, etc., etc. What are the advantages that we promote with the system? It leaves more time for external support to arrive, and that's what I will leave the floor to my partners to explain. It might potentially maximize the stock turnover, reduction of damaged item, capacity to pool the replenishment, as we mentioned, and to trigger the replenishment earlier, because if you dispatch your stock from areas that are not affected, you can also potentially trigger the replenishment with a few days in advance as well. On that, I will leave the floor to John online for the AZIREC platform, and I think you are going to share your screen to present that. So, John, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'll share my screen just at the end of this first slide. So regarding AZIREC and the readiness phase, we mentioned before that in the case of the cyclone, there was a 5-day notice, but what we're covering here are processes that can be done during that 5 days, but also in the longer period, in preparedness or in readiness, I should say, for a disaster, even months or maybe even years before. So these processes that we've identified, notably, is the needs assessment and immediate response. This is notably from the NDMO or NDMA. AZIREC could be used to review past events of similar natures, cyclones, and see the types and volumes of relief items that were imported in order to prepare the subsequent one, but also to identify priority relief items and verify available stocks through Stockholm that would then be used in the case of the upcoming emergency. We've also established the process to continuously update the list of emergency relief items, goods, and equipment required during the respective disaster response, including their HS code for each item, and this is particularly important in the case of customs, and any requested volumes. And of course, for customs, the needs for procedures and simplifications assessment, normally in the customs legislation, there will already be simplified procedures and other procedures which need to be applied during the emergency phase that will just be put in place. But all emergencies are not the same, so sometimes some adjustments to the legislations and simplified procedures might be needed. There will be a need to review border customs procedures and simplifications based on past events and to make the according adjustments, but of course this would need to be done rather quickly. Coming back to the NDMO, there will be the need to start to record the emergency initiation, not necessarily activate it yet, but to start to record the initiation with the start date for the customs facilitations and simplifications, and to consider the estimated duration of emergency. There will also be the need to record government priority relief items, but including the requested and estimated quantities. In terms of the practical element of AZIREC as a software, we need to look at and activate the list of eligible organizations. So this would be the operators, and whoever else would be needing to benefit from facilitated procedures during an emergency. It'll be also communicate the need of the country affected by the disaster to eligible organizations, helping to avoid unsolicited bilateral donations. And ASIREC was also there to notify competent regulatory agencies, other governmental agencies, involved in the clearance of humanitarian aid about the emergency. If I can just proceed to share my screen for you. So you should see, can you just confirm that you see a website, please?
Yes, it's visible.
Thank you very much. So we mentioned, I'd like to show you two factors here in the ASIREC system related to this slide, of course. So I'm connecting to the actual system, and I'm connected as a trader. So two factors I would like to demonstrate here at this particular point is we mentioned the need to maintain a list of relief items and a list of operators that would be the ones that could be considered during the declaration of emergency. So if we actually talk about commodities itself, we mentioned before the use of HS codes. This is critical to customs, of course. We cannot just have textual descriptions. So we have to maintain this list with the appropriate commodities and their description that will be related to relief items. Now, it doesn't mean that everything here will be used during the emergency that's going to happen, but these are the ones where we will take a subset to be the ones that can be benefit from facilitated procedures during the emergency. And this can also be updated during the emergency as well. It's a dynamic aspect. It's not fixed before the emergency happens, but it should be prepared well in advance. We talk about operators, we talk about traders, but this can also be individuals, non-governmental organizations, and anybody who's going to need to import goods during an emergency. So these are all the different traders that we can have. Again, a subset will be used during the emergency, but this needs to be updated and maintained long before, shortly before, and during the emergency. But the main role of the trader in this phase is to apply to the national NDMO and to customs to benefit from facilitated procedures for relief consignment. So I'm going to show you the authorization electronic document. Open up everything. So this is actually an authorization that's been requested in the system and issued as well. If you look at the first box, for a specific period of time, that period of time is when they apply saying, I would like to benefit during this period of time for the particular country, in this case, Madagascar. A section on the applicant information, the operator itself. But the most important thing is that they're going to request simplifications, i.e. simplified procedures. In this case, we have an example of two requested simplifications. Goods imported for humanitarian person must be owned by a person established, or goods imported for the benefit of disaster victim. Now, these are standard codes, AT001 and C26, and attached a simplification comes with conditions. And those conditions must be accepted, but it must be accepted by an authority. Now, it can be, that authority can either be the NDMO, or it can be customs. In this case, the two conditions that are attached to the simplification are accepted by the NDMA. And then the second simplification that was requested and provided also belongs to NDMA and also comes with a condition. The list of authorities related to this request must be included in the document. There could be more. And we record all the actions on this actual authorization, at what time, what they were done and who did it. We can also attach scanned electronic documents. So the trader can submit an authorization, a request for authorization with some supporting documents in electronic format. But what is the flow for this application? If I just come back to the list here, you'll see here in the history, i.e. the timeline of what's happened to this document. It was submitted by the trader at a certain time. It went into the status in progress. The result was then saved. The NDMA therefore gave its approvals, but is not, in this particular example, the authority to actually grant the authorization. This was done by customs, who also has to validate the simplifications and therefore the conditions, and issue or grant and therefore issue the authorization. And once it's granted, the trader can then benefit from facilitated procedures during the emergency phase. And we'll see what kind of items after that. If I can return to the PowerPoint, if you could just move to the next slide, please. But with the word data on it. Thank you. So we talked about processes. Let's talk about now the actual data. At this point, we talk about the need for notifications via ASIREC about border crossing points and working hours of the border agencies, including the notification of temporary closures of a port, which can happen, which did happen in the case of Madagascar. This kind of information needs to go out to the necessary actors who will be involved in the import, so they know where to go for customs and what time and what they can do. So it's a notion of information sharing. So if I could just come
Sorry,
back.
John, we cannot see your screen anymore.
Yeah, it's coming. I'm changing it.
Thank you.
So if we come back to the sharing of the screen, sorry about that. Okay. So we're talking about the publication of information and providing information to those users who are going to be importing goods. This is the public ASIREC website. And in this website, we're trying to illustrate what different governments or different customs administrations, or in combination with NDMOs, can provide as information always, but in particular during the time of emergencies. So if you take, for example, Madagascar, what we're trying to show here is that we can provide interactive information about the different agencies and the different where you need to who you need to process data with, and who are the authorities that you will be dealing with. So for example, if we click on Madagascar Customs, we can see the map, we can see the official working hours, how to contact them, etc., etc. We can also look at NDMO, location, times, how to contact them. Also, if we go further down, some regulatory organizations, we can also have any form of governmental agency included here as well. And medicines agency is an example of a non-governmental organization that will be particularly active, how to contact this. So this is a very, very important way of public information sharing, which ASIREC can assist in during this readiness phase. So I'm going to hand back to Florent and to my colleagues for the next step.
Thank you, John, for that. Colonel, is there anything you wanted to add on that before we move on?
Yes, of course, we have developed a manual of facilitation of humanitarian assistance, international humanitarian assistance that is coming to Madagascar in case of emergency, with the support of WMO 2 years ago, and we could implement them, and we have done all the steps with the support of to support custom authorities to implement to give, for example, all those information that is needed for ASIREC. Sometimes this flexibility available for this kind of tools is very important, because depending the disaster that we manage, of course, there is a need of updating the lists, not only of the actors that are to be listed in the software, but at the same time also the items. So it is very important to do and to have a decision-making process for our general director and our high-level authorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. We will move to the LogAI platform. Martin, are you with us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I leave the floor to you. You can share your screen.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen after this slide. So Martin Keitsch, working with the logistics cluster, as Florent introduced. And very quick on the LogAI, or Logistics Information Exchange platform. It is meant as a general go-to place, especially for the logisticians within the humanitarian organizations. And it is co-governed or co-led by national stakeholders as well as the international community. That means like these platforms that I'm showing right now in a minute are available for national stakeholders to basically include in the national information management framework. And for the example of Madagascar, Colonel Fall and colleagues basically actively use it, update the information, and that allows us basically what we call this vertical integration, that the international and national community can ad hoc access the same information. I'm going to go through more details later in the response phase, but what would happen in a readiness phase in such a moment is this system is automatically linked to a lot of external resources. So apart from the information that the logistics cluster community is collecting and disseminating, we are basically trying here to find, let's say, a relevant overview of all the information that might be important for a logistician, either on international or national level, to basically plan, in this case, ahead, or to estimate how the impact's going to be. So a lot of information that you're going to see is not basically done by the logistics cluster, but we are aggregating it together in a live overview. So in this scenario, let's say 5 days ahead of an emergency, for example, WFP has the ADAM tool that basically provides forecasts and impact estimates on cyclones. We are also using and cooperating with PDC, the Pacific Disaster Center, as they have also an extensive set of information and analytical capabilities on impact, on forecasts, on hazards, then of course GDAX and many other tools as well. Then for the information that's contained, we're mainly focusing on logistics infrastructure. So we're usually looking at everything from a port, airport, road, bridge, to warehousing, storage capacities, and anything else that might be of relevance for logisticians. We are sometimes also collecting data or aggregating data on amenities like health facilities, fuel stations, banks, whatever else might also be relevant. And as mentioned in the beginning, this tool is built to be governed by national stakeholders. So it can be really fully utilized by national responders. It is multilingual, and it allows for national governments or national stakeholders to basically use it, include it in their own disaster management framework. In this phase, apart from the information preparedness that I'm going to show now, we are also focusing on, let's say, classical preparatory steps, briefing, search deployments, if there's data collection on the ground to happen, also, having the chance here to be ahead of the impact to basically roll out data collection tools, and LogAI here also is meant as an aggregator. So yes, we have also our own data collection, but it's meant to work with Kobo, whatever else might be in use, ArcGIS tools, and what other stakeholders have. We also include live access to satellite imagery as much as we have access to it and are able to share it publicly. So looking at the screen, 1 second, I'm just taking over. Please let me know when you can see it.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, perfect. So Log-A basically is usually mainly built as a hopefully easy to use web interface, a bit like meant to work and look like Google Maps. You have all the different functions that you're familiar with. You can search for things. You can here also directly live report updates from the page itself. You can change the language. You can also sketch and draw on the map. If you want to, for example, export it, you have here this auto export function that generates a map of what you see right now on the screen, and then you can download it as a PDF in various formats. We have, as mentioned before, we have different base maps. Part of them are live linked to, for example, UNOSAT information services, for example, the Copernicus program. So if there is the first insights to come in, it is immediately available also as a background layer then in the map interface. Now coming back to our scenario, we basically used Adam to simulate a respective scenario. As you can see here, Adam automatically produced an info graphics. Now in this simulation, I'm just using one from another tropical cyclone, but it would look exactly the same. You have wind speeds, impact estimates, a quick map, and you see the cyclone path as a forecast with the classical cones as you're used to. Again, we are not doing this in terms of analytics. We're basically just plugging it in. And then the logisticians can, for example, say, okay, I'm interested in physical access constraints. So here you see these different modules on the top where you can then basically just switch what we try to map around a use case. So physical access constraints would be if you plan for a road convoy. So you see the last changes here, for example, on bridges, roads, and so on. As we're looking ahead of the emergency, this would be basically what to date is just known in that country, what is ongoing. You can then include hazard mapping. We have here access to everything that you're for sure familiar with. Historic hazards, impacts, vulnerabilities, trends, etc. And then we map out what Florent mentioned on the one hand, any information about logistics infrastructure, ports, airports, warehouses, bridges, roads, etc. And here just one example. For example, here in this scenario, the airport in Antananarivo is green at the moment. It's fine. And you can then embed here, for example, the entire logistics capacity assessment information that we have. And that would already tie to the use case from ASIREC, that basically opening hours, customs informations, links to ASIREC can be included. So basically you can really see here the status based from ICAO data, IATA, and sources like ASIREC in future, as we hope. And then the logistician from there can go to the respective tool to access more detailed information. And of course, storage capacity and mapping is included. We have usually a couple of analytical tools then as well, but this is really meant as a landing point. To just give you a very quick glimpse on how that would look in reality here, for example, for Ukraine, you would see then really showing what is the storage capacity at the moment based on the logistics cluster community information. Or in the Syria earthquake, you see here a combination of live data pulled from road authorities in Turkey. And you can see here in the colors the different border crossings, the airport supports, the current status, accessibility, etc. And coming back to our scenario, that would mean in our case here, in this readiness phase, we can see what's coming ahead, what is estimated to happen. And in the last cyclone, we could also see that nicely while the cyclone made landfall, already the first updates came in live. So you could really follow in near to real time the status of entry points, like in that case, airports, which are still available or not. And one of the small outlooks, what we want to do here also working thankfully with the impact working group. There was this dashboards developed in the past that we like a lot, where they then really live information from ICAO and others are basically included. And that's the next step that we want to have here as well. So you can really follow up in one central location, any logistics relevant information, and it is being maintained by BNGRC directly and the international community, whatever else we can contribute on top. And the rest would come then in the response phase. Back to you, Florent.
Thanks, Martin. I just would like to, I think there's a couple more slides for you to go after that, but just to complement what you were just mentioning, I just wanted to put back the Stockholm platform online. That's a different, you can see from the platform, we have this tab called National Disaster Analysis, and I think it's a good complement of what Martin was just mentioning. You can see on the log.io all the logistic information, and they were mentioning that one of the information is also the storage capacity they have. For what they have mapped, and mostly from the international partners, they have some information, and obviously with the work we do on Stockholm, we also have information. So, and the reason to coordinate, share the information, and make sure that we have the same information and that we complement from each other what we are missing. You can see on the map here, that's a national disaster analysis, but you can see that if you switch to that, you will see where are all the facilities that we have been recording so far. So by sharing that with the log.io platform, we might be able to have a much more complete map for both of us. That was just a quick update. When people online can ask questions. Maybe at the end of this first session, before the break, yeah. Martin, I just would like to pass over to you again, if you want to go through the last few slides, or if you're good to go.
Yeah, I'm very happy to. So yeah, if you want to just go to the next one. And again, this is also then for the handouts later. What we really focus on is this streamlined data processing. So what we really try is the so-called end-to-end information processing. So it is not, again, it's not we duplicate to other systems, but we try to basically plug them in that, yeah, let's take an airport. You in one overview see everything from the information we receive on the ground, the logistics capacity assessment, what the ICAO database has to offer, what we know about customs, etc. And really focusing on the key information based on the specific use cases. So for example, you want to fly in cargo, you plan to fly in cargo, you're interested in the entry points. If you want to do a convoy, you're interested in the road conditions and the amenities around your planned route. If you are looking for warehouses, you want to know where they are and their features, for example, cold chain. It was quickly visible at the Ukraine page, where we then see, okay, which of these warehouses have cold chain capabilities. You can also filter them, change the view, and then basically have the link to those contacts of partner organizations here providing services to the community. And this vertical integration I mentioned before basically means that we try to combine national level knowledge, information sources with international. So vertical means that at the very same time, in the very same instance, be it a responder on the ground, having an update, or from an international source or satellite imagery, whatever, the same update on the same area, the same type of logistics infrastructure comes in, you immediately see it in the same interface. Horizontal integration means that across the different organizations, we try to establish this common information basis. And that is no news. I mean, that's part of the logistics cluster mandate. This tool just tries to optimize the speed. So we could demonstrate that here, these lead times in the past have been significantly improved. So for example, just providing overview on physical road access took several hours, at least in the past. Now it takes 3 minutes, and you have an up-to-date information. Plus, from traffic information, be it Google or be it national level sources, can be directly overlaid. So you really have a one-at-a-glance overview. And that obviously also brings the resource efficiency. Instead of having to send around Excel files, etc., you can directly do that in an integrated system. And of course, you don't have to go to this website. If you have your own information systems, you can basically just plug in this so-called API. So you can just pull the data from the log.io service. Yeah, and then the maps are fully customized. Have also, depending on the operational contacts, we can bring in different views from hazard mapping, simulations, concept of operation, service provisions, infrastructure. But just to outline, this is a news or information aggregator in that sense. So we really want to bring this information together. We're not necessarily duplicating existing systems. As Florent mentioned, we want to combine the information about warehouses and not add an additional tool or layer to it. Thank you, Flo.
Thank you, Martin. I think we will move to the last player in this first phase of readiness, which is Jihad for the International City. And after that, before the break, we'll see if we have a few questions online that we can already start taking. What you?
Thank you, Florent. Thank you, Virginie, everyone. I know it's already afternoon and maybe tired, but be happy. This is the last session, so you can go home after that. What I'm trying to explain here, and I'll try to stick with the main idea. I'm sure that maybe most of you have already heard about those tools separately previously, but the idea here is to try to put them all together so we have the best and the better benefit for the humanitarian community during responding to emergencies by collaborating the efforts of the 3 or 4 tools that we have right here. As Florent mentioned before, we are using this as a scenario just to demonstrate to you and give you a better idea about how those tools can work together and why they are, I believe, meant to work together for a better achievement. The idea is that now we know that there is a cyclone that is coming in 5 days and we need to be prepared. And this is the first category of our session now, talking about preparedness. About readiness. So we should be ready. So in order to do that, if we take a scenario practically, I will take it action by action, and then I will go to the slides, which is going to summarize the live show that I'm going to show you on the dashboard right now. So the first step we should do after we put those 4 tools together is to check what is available inside the country. And this can be done through Stockholm. By accessing Stockholm, we can see what is the stock available. At the same time, we have, for sure, we will use logistic cluster because they will do some assessment in the country, and also the National Disaster Management Authority, the NDMO and the NDMA. Once we have the items required, Stockholm will give us an idea about what is available in the local country, in the affected country. And then we can see what are the gaps. What are the missing items? Do they have enough quantity or they don't? Who is the owner of those stocks? The similar information you can get on a regional level or international level by using the Humanitarian Logistic Data Bank. So as the scenario that we have right now, we noticed during the list that Florent showed us a while ago that there are no hygiene kits inside the country. There are no solar lamps, MSUs, mobile storage unit, and very few number of blankets, for example. So what we have to do now, the next level is to check with the data bank and see what is available inside. Now, usually, you go to the nearest hub. Here, we have a map of the 11 hubs that are pre-positioning relief stock to be used during emergency. So by looking at the map, logically, of course, Madagascar is here, so the nearest hub is Nairobi. So first we have to check with Nairobi if the available stock can fill the gaps of what is missing already in the country. If it's not, then we move to the further hub. Now in this case, unfortunately, so far the data bank has only Dubai, UAE, and Panama. And we are working now, and that's why we are creating more awareness about this platform to see how we can really work and accommodate the other 11 hubs under the same platform. And this is the target, and this is what we're looking for. So imagine once we have the 11 hubs added in this platform, so you really have an overview of international relief stock available and pre-positioned to be dispatched whenever an emergency happens. So in this case, we will go to Dubai and see what is available, if we can fill the gaps additionally. How this dashboard works, just to give you an idea. Basically, it's something related to what John mentioned a while ago. It's about the HS code. The idea here is that each line item has an HS code identified by the word or custom organization. And this is the unique key that we use for all those items. We have mapped more than 5,000 line items, and we make sure that they are using the right HS code. We coordinate with the customs, and the customs are pushing the data on daily basis whenever there is an import or export happening from a particular hub during emergency. So that is how it is getting updated. So we don't rely on warehouse management system. We don't go back to the main player, humanitarian player. They can continue what they are doing, responding to emergency. The data we are getting directly from the customs, being the code, custom code and the HS code. This is how it works basically, very simple, straightforward. The first 6 digits are unified around the world, and this is what we use to coordinate and link with Stockholm, with ICEREG, and with the other hubs as well. Going back to our scenario, let's say now I need to know what is available inside Dubai, if I can fill the gaps or no. Basically, as I mentioned earlier, I would just choose the nearest hub, for example, now UAE. The items that I'm looking for, let's say I need to know if how many blankets I have in Dubai. Very basic, very straightforward. Let's say synthetic blanket. So we have 720,000 blankets available in Dubai already, ready to be dispatched. And as you can see, you know who's the owner of each item, of the items, what is the quantity they have, so you can immediately contact them instead of trying to send emails, making some phone calls. It took us literally less than a minute to get this information. What else we have missing in Madagascar? We said MSUs, mobile storage unit. Comes under this. There is one available now within MSF. All the stock is outside. So this is an item that cannot be fulfilled from this hub. We have to look for another hub, for example. Or let me just make sure, because we have two. Type, yeah. Only one. The next item that we have, and this is again an indication to replenish the stock and make sure that we have the stock. I'm using this data as well. The third one is solar lamp. Wait, I have to choose, select all. I think your typing is slow. 213. So basically, we can see if we can fill the gaps, if the items are available, the quantity of the items, who is the owner, and immediately we can start coordinating. Instead of waiting a lot of time, now the data, and imagine if you have this information for multiple hubs around the world. So you can choose more than one hub, choose the nearest hub, and you see if those items are available or not. Now, moving forward now, after this one, just to recap, I'm finishing this section about the readiness, and I'm starting also the response type. So I'm going to club all together to make it easier for you to follow the scenario. Through this page, I can tell exactly, and I can know what has been dispatched already to a specific country. This is to avoid overlap, to save time, save efforts, and save cost as well. So if I type here, Madagascar, for example, so I know what has been dispatched already to this specific country. If I know that the quantity has been dispatched already from a specific items is more than enough, and this is what has been requested from the affected country by the NDMA or whatever, then I will redirect my support to a different item that has been not dispatched yet. It might be medical items, it might be another shelter items. This will help, first of all, reducing the bottlenecks in the entry point, especially if this is a natural disaster and the entry point is already exhausted or they have already items. I know that we are all trying to help. Everyone is trying to dispatch relief items during the emergency, but sometimes having just a small information can help more the affecting country by sending the right items, the missing items, and try to avoid just sending all the relief items that we have to the affected country. Very simple, one click, we know what has been dispatched and we can accordingly prepare ourselves. In IC, when I receive a request for responding to any emergencies, we activate directly something called the task force. The task force, this is something that it's a WhatsApp group, basically. We have identified among our operational members who we have, the UN and IFRC in IC in Dubai. So basically we start asking, this is an emergency happening. If someone is ready to dispatch any items, what are the items? What is the volume of those items and what is the weight? And based on that, we start coordinating also chartering flights either commercially or asking donors and see how we can support their operations and respond to the emergency from Dubai. We always make sure that by coordinating with them that the flights are full, and we have utilized with all the items needed as much as we can by gathering more than one organization, one flight if we can. One of the more benefits also for this platform from the Humanitarian Logistic Data Bank is by having those information and knowing what is available in country through Stockholm and choosing the nearest hub, somehow also we are impacting in a positive way the carbon emission. And instead of receiving items or requesting for items from a different hub or from China or whatever to come to Madagascar, where I can have it from the nearest country as well, this is something also we can save cost, of course, fast response, and also we can save into the carbon emission. We can reduce the carbon emission as well, because then the flight trip will be shorter than what is supposed to be if it's coming from a different country. This is in general what the system can do. Only for this specific scenario. So you can just imagine with me how benefit can be if we have more hubs available and if we can link those through a platform, 3 systems. So internally we have in the country Stockholm, the Humanitarian Logistic Data Bank will give us an idea of what's happening, what is available in the nearest hub. The assessment is done by Logistic Cluster and DMO. The support with the customs from the ICERIC system as well, because once the NDMA decide what are the 10 mainline items, the same will be uploaded in ICERIC, so we have more better facilitation and process, pre-declaration, for example, so things will go fast. All this circle will definitely support the response and have a better response during emergencies. I will go through the slides quickly, which is going to summarize what I have just mentioned. And maybe a little bit of couple of information, and then I'll be ready to receive maybe the questions will be after the session. We will have questions from here and from the audience online. Just last remark to close, I had my first presentation HNPW a couple of years ago, and at that time I requested the audience to be patient with me, not to ask me difficult questions because my CEO was there. And now guess what? After a few years, I'm going to ask the same questions because the same CEO is still there and sitting watching me. And I have even higher management online and physically. So try to choose a very nice, easy questions. Yeah. So as I mentioned, as you can see here, the first step will be accessing Stockholm to see what is the available stock, linking the line items that we need with ICERIC as well, which we are going to identify with the NDMA. And then we have an access to, of course, to the Humanitarian Logistic Data Bank to see what are the items missing, how we can fill the gaps, knowing the quantity, the ownership, and the location of the relief items. Once we have all this information, we start identifying the transportation method, the closest humanitarian hub, having a sustainable action and efficient in a cost and time manner, because then we are using the nearest hub instead of choosing another hub which is a little bit far from the affected country. Activate the task force as well. Explore and anticipate the flight options for the first wave of dispatch, but at the same time we can also activate, if it is applicable, of course, some few sea shipments. So simultaneously, when we start responding by air, because this is an emergency, maybe we can seek an option of moving by sea also relief items. So then we have the circle running through the sea instead of using the flights. This is better from a carbon emission point of view. We can have more volumes using the sea shipment, and of course it's cheaper. But the first response over the first wave always has to be, of course, by air. Explore and anticipate flight options. Yeah, this is what I have mentioned. And the second point is about using the sea shipment. Now, also, once we do the steps, we can provide the NDMO and humanitarian access. Now, who should have this access to this combined platform? Of course, the country representatives, the NDMA. They are the one who can assist what are needed, and they can tell us who can help and what can benefit, how they can benefit from this platform. Humanitarian actors, of course, they can. It supports their operations. It gives them an idea but this is mainly it should be accessed by the NDMA and the government representative in affected country, and those who should have access to this platform. We are working on it. It is under process. We will see how we can link them all under one platform, and then it will have, I'm sure it will have a huge impact on the humanitarian community. The second point, coordinate and establish priorities to joint flight among our members for a faster delivery, and then provide a clear picture on available items in various pipelines response. As I mentioned, that we can show it has been dispatched already. So ISEREC can be aware of what is happening, what is coming on the way, and also humanitarian actors can know what has been dispatched already to the country, so they are aware of what is still missing to refill the gaps. Encourage the use of one unique tool of communication versus multiple, and this is what we are trying to do. We all exist since few years, I believe. We're working separately, but now we are trying to put them all together under one platform. And then encourage the provision of all requested data information to enable AI. We didn't stop at this level of gathering the information. What we did also together, after having this idea of having a unified platform, we are also, based on the historical data that we have of the last 5 years in data bank, we are working closely with an artificial intelligence company based in Dubai to see how they can do analysis to those data and predict future. So by having some information, we can know based on the historical data that usually like monsoon season, we know that happens every year, a certain month of the year. Then knowing what has been dispatched previously as a response, it can give us an indication that, by the way, be aware that usually last year you dispatched 100,000 blankets, now you have only 20,000. Replenish the stock and be ready. If this happened in advance, and if this is notification received in advance, then we'll be able to save time by having those ready in the hub. We save cost because if we request for those items during the emergency, the price will be high. And also we make sure that we have enough time to have this replenished in our stock. So we don't have to hurry and or dispatch, or maybe it has to be ordered from a far away. Again, we are impacting somehow, touching the carbon emission point. I believe that's it for this. We will stop here for questions before we move to the next part of the presentation.
Thank you, Jihad. I believe, Sophia, we have like 1 million questions online. We don't have access from here, so you will have to shoot a few others, please.
Yes, we have one. Should I read it for you?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a question from Manuel. Does the current big data approach allow for future predictions about the probability of a sudden onset disaster, such as a tropical cyclone, and the risk that poses to a population, so that this prediction can be used as a basis for stockpiling and prepositioning of relief supplies?
Okay, I think we all have some part of the answer. So I think Jihad just mentioned the idea of working with an AI-based company in Dubai to do exactly that, to look at the prediction based on the last 5 years of a disaster in a country, and then look at how we can turn that into prediction. I think Martin also mentioned in the LogAI platform, they also have a functionality to look at the forecast and projection of disaster, to start looking at the number of affected people, the potential impact on infrastructure, everything. So I think, as we've discussed from the beginning, we all have some bits and pieces of that. And again, as part of this coordinated effort, I think the idea will be to see what we have and how we can centralize all those information. On the Stockholm platform, if I may take this opportunity, we also have, where am I? Here. We also have, we have this screen that you can see here. It's a disaster analysis for the last 40 years. So we use the database of MDAT, emergency database. So this is not our data. We have our data analyst, Asina, sitting over there. She has been doing with part of the team a massive job in cleaning those information and making them available. So all this information are now available on Stockholm. They're also available on an Excel format in our on our website, so they're accessible for whoever needs them for whatever. It doesn't have to be for stock. And all this is dynamic. So if you look at Madagascar, you can select the storm part of the pie chart, and you'll see where the storms are. You can see what are the. You can drill that down at the provincial level, so you see how many disasters, how many people were affected, etc., etc. So you can also see where the facilities are in comparison to the disaster. So we all have bits and pieces to answer the question about those projection and a lot of information. The next step will be to see how we put that together so that it's accessible to everybody in a clear way. I think that partially answers the question. Before you pick another one, maybe, and then we'll start the first part of the first phase, and then we'll go for the break. I just wanted to check with Colonel if you wanted to add something on this first phase of the response following the presentation of Azirek and International City.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Madagascar has developed a manual of anticipatory action. All of the tools, especially ISUPS, Azirek, and Stockholm with ISUPS, Azirek, and then Lobai, we separately already use as colleagues from humanitarian logistic data hub just mentioned, but we use them separately. And I think one of them, every one of my focal point to this reserves, and then global logistic cluster, and then Azirex also already know that we try to give a kind of messages always, ability of those tools. So this is a good, of course, a good example to be taken as a follow-up. Maybe I will, if you allow me, I will insist and propose to insist on it at the end. But all of the information that is provided improve to do those anticipatory actions that we have implemented before the cyclone is hitting the country. So I think it is really a good tool to bring a very big and huge added value for us as NDMO. I think in every presentation that one of you have stated in your word, in your sentence, a lot of time, the importance of NDMO. And we as NDMO here in Madagascar, we really take as a duty to make sure that everything is going smooth forward well, and with all those support that you kindly provide. For example, for Freddy, even if it was supposed to be a very big cyclone ever passed to Madagascar, ever passed to the Indian Ocean, the impact in Madagascar was less than the other countries because of all of those anticipatory action and because of all those tools that firstly used separately. But can you imagine what we can also do it, as the colleague said, all together and well coordinated? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel, for that. So I think as a next step, we have another few minutes. I'll let Sofia pick up another question for later. Maybe we can start the process of going to the readiness phase. I'll leave the floor back to Jihad. and then we'll have a quick break, or normal break actually, and then we'll come back for finishing the scenario and the rest of the different phases. Sophia, can you switch back?
Yeah. The presentation is fine?
Yeah.
Okay. And if you want, I can also share one more question, if you're ready to take one more.
We'll take one after that, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. As I mentioned earlier, I just tried to make combine together the two sessions. So this is the recap of what I have explained live on the dashboard on the data bank. As you can see, we trigger immediate dispatches by air upon request, which is using the task force that we have. And then we start coordinating with our members and see exactly what are the items available, what is ready, the volume and the value and the weight. And we start coordinating a flight to dispatch the same. We're trying to utilize the full flight as much as we can to reduce cost and carbon emission. If relevant, also dispatch a shipment by sea, as I mentioned earlier. This is an option that we should keep in mind also. We don't do immediately, but this is something that we should be consider moving forward, honestly. Capturing the transaction from customs, the data bank will track the ongoing dispatches, as I mentioned, so we know it has been dispatched already, what is in the pipeline, in coordination with ICEREC and also the NDMOs, they know what is coming on the way, which is impact a smooth operation at the entry point as well. Proper coordination and knowledge of relief cargo movements impact the overall response positively, of course. We also try to lower cost by and larger volume again, less carbon emission in coordination with ICEREC and logistic clusters as well. The last point will be data bank shall share information with ICEREC in the pipeline items so they can prepare and provide a custom pre-declaration in advance to make sure that there is a smooth operation at the entry point of the country. So this is overall what our contribution at the dashboard can do to this combination of tools that we are talking about here, and how at the end can benefit the NDMOs and also the humanitarian actors in general. We are not stopping here. After a while, Mr. Giuseppe will take part, and then after that we have the AI company will be online to do a presentation of an example of few information that they have managed to get based on our historical data as well. And we will always try to continue how we can impact better the humanitarian community through the dashboard.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Jihad, for that. I'll leave the floor for the ASIREC part of the response. Now we are in the response phase, so I leave. So it's going to be John who's going to represent that as well. So John, over to you.
Thank you, Florent. Now moving on to the response phase from an ASIREC point of view. Again, we identified certain processes in conjunction with our colleagues and supporting agencies. The eligible organizations, the operators and the different organizations that we mentioned in the readiness phase, in this phase will be lodging electronic simplified declarations through ASIREC, providing any supporting documents prior to the arrival of goods, with consignments flagged as humanitarian relief. So the ideal situation is that they submit or lodge these simplified declarations before arrival in a pre-arrival manner. They will be able to track and trace the consignments, receive notifications of need for control or inspection, or notification for release from customs, so that they can follow what's going on with their consignment and therefore their simplified declaration. In terms of that's ASIREC, but also ASIREC will have identified the organizations and the relief items specific to the emergency, and priority is therefore given to the clearance of these emergency relief items. The overall abiding principle here will be the coordination of border clearance process. So the NDMO in combination with customs will be at this point not only declaring, but activating the actual emergency procedure, which will of course then be the umbrella for the simplified declaration and for the relief items. If I can just move to the to share my screen. So if we go back into ASIREC, and this time we're going to focus on declaring the actual emergency procedure. Here, the emergency document, emergency procedure document, the electronic document as such, is the one that allows us to declare the emergency, and this could be done by the National Disaster Management Agency organization. Let's take here the one that we've done for Madagascar. Let me show you the document itself. So the emergency procedure is initiated and declared. Now the system is based on profiles. So if in different countries, they can assign the role of declaring the emergency to the appropriate organization. In this example, it was the NDMA, but it can be any other agency, and the profiling will be done accordingly. So the emergency procedure has an event code, extratropical cyclone. Here on the left, the country is Madagascar. The system will assign a reference number, and a draft reference is given at the beginning, and then official reference number once it's validated. There's a clear validity period. We'll talk about the end date in the next phase. The important factor here, or one of the three most important things I would say here in this sections, is to define for the emergency procedure the type of imports that can be done. So there are two types. One is for import for home use, generally under the codification IM4. And then we have the temporary admission, which is generally IM5 in the international standard codifications. Then we have to consider what the extended code is. Again, this is an international standard. It's generally 4,000, but it can vary according to country. And the particular national additional code, which in this case will vary from country to country, that will be used exactly for this. This will be the actual procedure used, or the most precise level of the procedure used for relief items in the emergency. Again, for the temporary admission, this will be the extended procedure code and the relevant additional code, which will be precisely indicating what will be used in the simplified declaration. And this will allow the system to understand that this is for relief items and therefore benefit from facilitated procedures. We have a section on timers and reminders. This is a configuration. The different time delays for an automatic validation of the simplified declaration in hours and then in minutes. Time delay for submission of a fully consolidated declaration if necessary, and a reminder for submission of that consolidated declaration. Of course, that's at a later phase once the relief items have been cleared. We mentioned the two most important elements, even in the readiness phase, but also, of course, in the response phase, is the definition of who and what happens in the emergency. So who is allowed to import during the emergency and what they can import. So we can, the NDMO or customs or whoever is going to declare the emergency can add a list of operators. And these, of course, operators who are registered in the system and who have been authorized to benefit will be put at this phase. Now, even if you've declared the emergency and you are in the emergency, you can still add further operators. But as we all know, this will never be a fixed in stone list when the emergency starts. So this is an ongoing dynamic process. Similarly, for commodities, you will note that when we declare the emergency, we will define all the different commodities with their HS code, of course, that will be allowed to be imported in the country under the facilitated simplified procedures. And we also define for each of these commodities whether it can be used multiple times, if it's unlimited quantity, a critical threshold if necessary, and therefore, if there is a limit, then what is the maximum quantity that can be imported during the emergency process? And then we have to keep track of how much is entered, officially declared and entered, and therefore how much is left, and not to go above that amount. So the emergency procedure includes, and we do this dynamically, is that we include all the simplified declarations that have been validated, and therefore the goods have been entered properly, and we list all the declarations, simplified declarations attached to this emergency. And of course, this is a dynamic process. So by the end of the emergency, we should have a big list of simplified declarations, and this allows us to, of course, determine what the relief items are and what the quantities are related to one particular emergency. Let's have a glance now at the simplified declaration. Here we have an example of a simplified declaration. Let's open it. What you will note in this case is that for those of you that are familiar with the full customs declaration that is used around the world, also known as the SAD, Single Administrative Document, the simplified declaration is very much smaller and a smaller subset of data compared to a full customs declaration. The information is the type of declaration, or the parties who are actually the consignee itself, that is lodging the declaration. It can also be a declarant as well, and a consigner. The declaration is import for home use, specific circumstance indicator code, which customs office, the routing country if there is one. Transport information, means of transport, in this case we put air. A unique consignment reference number, so this is a very useful key element to be able to identify consignments, even with one particular field. Location of arrival, valuation information, and then of course the most important part are the actual goods. That you can add several different items to your simplified declaration, and this can be as many as required. Of course, the more facilitated it is, the less items we have, and we add the items one by one, and in each item there'll be the commodity code, the quantity, the mass, package type, etc. And this will be the core element of the simplified declaration, are these items. And of course, these are the relief items. Only relief items related to this emergency procedure will be allowed. If not, the simplified declaration simply cannot be lodged at all. So if we look at the actual lifespan of a simplified declaration, if we look at the history, so the trader itself will do the direct register, which is the lodging, and that's pre-arrival. Then customs will take over at that point and will view the goods, the actual consignment, on arrival physically, and declare that the goods have arrived. At the same time, there can be the application of some risk assessment. Now, of course, the idea during the emergency is not to have full risk assessment with 90% inspection. The point is to have less inspection, but targeted inspection, because we all know that there is unsolicited donations. So the customs will register the fact that it's arrived and say it's okay. They might hold it or they might not. And then they will, if they are satisfied, they will validate and release the goods, the consignment linked to this simplified declaration. If I could just come back to the emergency procedure, just to give you a better picture, I forgot to mention here what is the timeline, or what is the different operations. So the emergency procedure, like I mentioned, NDMA might be the one declaring it. Customs will then validate it, and customs will modify it. They have the right to modify it according to the requirements, which could be further relief items, further operators, modification of quantity of the relief items, etc. And this is an ongoing dynamic document throughout the full process of the emergency phase. If I could come back to the next slide related to data. So if we talk about the actual data in the response phase, there will be the monitoring of the volume of the relief items imported. This can be done by NDMO notably, updating the list of emergency relief items and quantities, and then also activate new operators, new eligible organizations if necessary. Customs will be receiving the pre-arrival information through the simplified declaration. That's the sort of key data for later on. That'll be very useful. There'll be the risk management techniques, like I mentioned, for pre-arrival processing. The idea is that most of it would be immediate release, but of course there does need to be some form of inspection or documentary check from time to time. Prioritization of those physical inspections and coordinations of controls upon arrival, if required, through fully automated processing and rapid release of goods by customs. But also at this phase, we'd also need to start monitoring non-compliance and suspend any simplifications for organizations involved in serious repeated violations. So if their customs and border agencies can identify any non-compliant organizations, then immediately any simplifications that they were given should be stopped at that point. So I will hand back to Florent for the next section, please.
Thank you, John. It's 3:30 here, so I think it's time for the break. Upon return at 4, I think, we'll go through the rest of the response phase, which will be relatively quick. We start with the cluster log AI platform in the response phase, and then we'll finish with the closing the loop of the preparedness phase. So see you all in half an hour for the end of the scenario. Thank you. All right, good afternoon for the second part, everyone. So just as a follow-up, we started the scenario on the basis of 3 phases: readiness, response, and preparedness. And each of the 4 projects are going through what they can do and what their role is in each of the phases. We are halfway through the response phase, and I'm going to leave the floor to Martin for the logistic cluster preparedness and the LogAI platform. And then I will close that part before we move to the lessons learned and preparedness response. Martin, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm with you. Can you hear me?
Oh, yep, go ahead.
Perfect, great. Yeah, welcome back. I try to keep this slide short and more focus on the demo. So as mentioned already, in the readiness phase, we do the same in response, usually through search teams on the ground. And yeah, as the case for Madagascar, where BNGRC is strongly using this, and we already had several emergencies together in a sense. We can basically directly tap into a couple of links. Now here, for the sake of this demonstration, what we would foresee, or where we see an added value is, for example, when talking about customs, this is one of the key questions or requirements that come up every emergency, again, on towards the logistics cluster. Okay, what is the current status on customs? What are the requirements? Sometimes even simple things like, what is the opening hours of an entry point, a border crossing? What's the current status? Is there a contact number, an email address? What are the current procedures? Now, with ASIREC established, or where ASIREC would be implemented in a country, this would be a really strong link then for us. We would basically focus on, okay, these are the key, whatever, top 3 information that we can directly include in LogAI, and from there then link our users directly to the ASIREC platform. We have, especially for entry points, this is usually one of the most looked at information, as you probably recently have also seen with the Turkey, Syria emergency, where these cross-border operations were of major concern. So we are here also trying to overlap this information. Then storage capacity is always coming as well. Maybe just here a side comment on the logistics cluster mandate. The facilitation of service provision here really comes in terms of, let's say we have organization A in urgent need for storage capacity, and organization B has maybe a warehouse already under operation and some spare capacity to share. And we're trying to, not trying, we're basically the platform facilitating this, this matching, so to say. The same then when it comes to stock and stock levels, that is one of the points we're currently working with Stockholm to basically directly integrate this information. So let's say in simple terms, to avoid that a logistician from an organization has to go through 3, 4, 5, 6 or more websites to consume and combine different information components to basically have it all together. And then when it comes about the actual interaction, to be with the subject matter tool. On the road access constraints, that's one of the things where we are also actively participating. So in general, LogAI, but not only, also other IAM tools that we're operating are really focusing on these elements, whereas the cargo movement itself or the stock levels itself, there is established platforms. Yeah, on the situation and status itself, what we are usually focusing on is if there's ways to directly tap into the source, so to say. So for example, in Turkey, the road authority had already a live situation feed on road status, at least for the primary roads. So great, why having to manually bring that together? And we have this across the board, everything from satellite imagery to aerial assessment, impact assessments. As the situation is very vivid, we try to here avoid these manual steps in between, because what happens in reality very often is one person puts it into an Excel table, sends it around, another person has to take that table and put it into some other tool. And yeah, in the case of Madagascar, this already happened through the leadership of BNGRC. And here, for example, BNGRC is collecting through a table road access information since long. And we're basically or we worked on simply then importing this table on a live basis. So I'm quickly showing how that.
Sorry, Martin, we don't see your screen.
Yeah, I was basically just like talking through the slide. I'm sharing right now. 1 second. So I hope you can see it now.
Yes.
Okay. Looking at the tool right now, as you see, the situation has developed, and this really reflects real scenarios where we could basically map out the situation throughout while basically the cyclone was making landfall. And you see this airport is closed. These are closed. Obviously, this is now for the sake of a simulation. You also can see that a couple of roads have been reported as currently being closed due to the emergency situation. And you also see here the first field reports coming in about roads being passable or not passable, for example, whatever, due to a vehicle. This is authentic imagery, but not for that specific location. What also happened in the past, then if aerial assessment was taking place, again, real imagery, this can be included directly. What we saw is beyond these maps that very often the raw primary data collected imagery itself is already of great benefit. I mentioned it briefly before. So based on what the logistician or the humanitarians coming, what are they looking for? We try to simplify a bit this vast amount of information by having different modules. So for example, I had it before, logistics capacity mapping. So if someone is interested in a specific area or in physical access constraints, maybe wants to see, I don't know, the airports together with that, and maybe the ports, could now say, okay, this is relevant for us. I want to have it on a map and export it, and exported product, that's the one I clicked on before, then can be, for example, made to whatever, print, plot, and use offline. We focus usually here on the infrastructure, not the cargo content, but just to showcase how that could then look like in case of ESAPs being linked. So we here basically use the data dump that Florent shared beforehand. And then you could, again, this is not how the final interface would look like, but you could then, for example, say, okay, we see whatever in which area in which, in that case, admin 1 region, stock levels are currently in case, or zooming in what is in there, how many kitchen, etc. In general, we try to focus on user-friendly interfaces. So this here would be the raw data, not as we want to show it then. And that maybe as a general remark, that there's like 2 main challenges that we see. One is to really provide access to this information, combining these sources, but the other challenge is also, okay, what is relevant? An airport alone has over 60 different attributes describing it, from whatever runway length to opening hours of the customs bureau. And the question is always, okay, what is relevant? How can we avoid just overloading this page, overloading information, and therefore these new use cases like here with ESAPs would then basically be subject to a review and understanding, okay, what can we in a preliminary basis show before then? Let's assume someone is, okay, great, here, whatever, 25, 26 buckets, and then be guided to the ESAPs page, to the Stockholm page directly. But this for now is just a demonstration. Just on the updates themselves, I wanted to quickly show this as well. So for example, let's assume there is information coming in. The editor interface would also see whatever latest reports here on flooding, on roads. I don't know, what do we have here? That one, for example. So that was an authentic report made by a field colleague, and basically on a different location, obviously at a different time. And basically this then can be merged together, and let's assume the officer would define, okay, based on our intel, based on our verification, this access route here at the moment is only passable to a limited extent. And just to show what real time then actually means is you can then really here whatever mark that road segment and say, okay, this N6, we want to the entire road. And there's different ways to do it. I'm not just using the paint tool. I want to mark this entire road segment as limited access, so whatever this is passable with restrictions at the moment only for cars. You can also make it limited to humanitarian, whatever it might be, and then commit it. And from that moment on, it's basically updated, published, the status is changed. And then within maximum 1 minute, that's the update refresh frequency you see, then this is done. This really allows us to minimize the entire lead time from information coming in to being available to the community to, literally minutes. The longest process it takes now is the information management officer, be it a colleague from BNGRC sitting in Madagascar, be it a colleague on international level providing information, the validation process itself. So at what degree, to what extent am I sure enough to define this is sufficiently verified to be shared publicly? Of course, obviously, we have then all the classical IM markers from reliability, source definition, where it's coming from, imagery behind it. But basically, this was just to show how fast this system then can actually provide the updates. Or here, for example, the airport, we then can directly link in any other information coming in from other sources. But for us, the focus here is really we want to make sure that this is lightweight, easy to access, and providing as fast as possible while being as reliable as possible information to the humanitarian community. Yeah, then maybe in light of the current time, I would just have a quick look to show the map product that we generated. So at the moment, we're improving this mapping tool as well to basically meet a couple of user requests who said, okay, that's the way we want to have these maps, because very often internet connectivity might be here and there, but we want to have these really to print and then work on paper or continue working offline. And then, maybe a last point to have mentioned as well on the data. We focused for now on the map interface, but of course, this is then an end-to-end interface that also allows for tabular formats or dashboards, analytics, whatever else you want. But for us, really, the focus here is to understand, well, what are the key pressing information needs, and to optimize the interface for this. But just to reiterate, our key users are operational logisticians with limited time and a clear, let's say, use case, either coming to send in cargo, to transport cargo, to store it, or here with the new case, use case to maybe see also what stock levels at the moment for specific relief items are already available. Yeah, I would hand over back to you, Florent, in case there's questions. I'm still in the chat, but maybe not to take too much time for the rest. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Martin. Very interesting. Just wanted to add a couple of things on that before moving to what the Stockholm part would be in this response phase. I just want to mention that the LogAI platform is publicly accessible, so all the information there, as mentioned, Martin, need to be somehow verified, etc., before they're going public. The Stockholm platform is not, so you need to be registered because we have personal information. We are abiding to the GDPR data protection framework. And when we plan to share those information, like Martin showed in the LogAI platform, the information will be aggregated. So there will be no display about who's owning it, what are the exact GPS location. It will be a grouping of information as Martin showed you on the map. You will have a grouping saying the community in this province has 3,000 blankets, but they will don't know specifics. In order to access the specific, you will need to log into the Stockholm platform, where if you are a registered user, you will access the detail, etc. So we are taking the data question seriously. I also wanted to, sorry, what's the question?
No, it's a really good point. Maybe I would just also outline on this. In general, when it comes to log.ie, we have the same policy. So as you said, we focus on aggregated information, and we have several data protection layers or firewalls, however you want to call it, in between. So if someone, for example, would provide information, if we would decide that this is relevant and verified for public use, all the personal information is stripped off and or aggregated according to OSHA and GDPR standards. So this is a very good point. Thank you, Florent.
Thanks, Martin. So just in regards to the Stockholm platform, as I said before, Stockholm is not designed as a response mechanism. So during this phase, there's very little you can do. But I just want to show you, you can see on the screen. So I'm logged in at the moment as one of the Madagascar departments. And if I go into the facilities, I'm just going to show you what's the process to update a stock. You imagine you have been dispatching, you're getting a replenishment, you update your stock. So here you'll find your facilities. And if you pick one like this one, you can then edit the facility. You can pick up one of your items, you edit, and you simply change the quantity from 45 to whatever that is, 140, and you save. And that's it. That's how you update your data. So we've tried to make it as simple as possible. The idea is that the ownership of the platform is passed down. So we give access to the global coordinator logistic for an organization like IOM. I think they're sitting right here. And then Taylor, who is in charge at global level, will pass over to the coordinator of the Americas or Asia, Pacific or Africa. And the person in charge of Asia Pacific will pass over to Asia and Pacific, et cetera, until you get down to the facility manager. So each facility manager will update their facility and their list of items. And then all that combined will make the person at the top and all the people in between to have an overview of the stock they're in charge of. So we try to keep that as simple as possible. One more thing, so on the we've passed that. So basically on the Stockholm platform during the response phase, besides dispatching, replenishing and updating your stock, that's about all you can do because the whole platform functions on the fact that you have up-to-date data to do the analysis, and until the data are not up-to-date, there's not much you can do. Just mention as well as part of this scenario, while we are presenting those 4 tools and how we can support each other and interact and complement each other, we keep very much aware in this scenario, there are other players and other factors that are not taken into consideration. We know there's a private sector, and we know there's long-term supplier agreement. We know that there's other factors that would also have an impact about how much stock is required. So it's not only about what is required in Stockholm, and then we would go to the international human city. There's a whole private sector capacity in country and in the neighboring countries that are not taken into consideration in this scenario. Doesn't mean we don't. It means that at the moment, they are not sitting with us to be part of this exercise. But definitely, we have engaged processes to make sure we can connect with the CBI initiative or others to also bring information about the private sector to give the NDMO or decision maker an even more exhaustive picture about the capacity there. Just wanted to mention that. So we're going to move into the last phase of the exercise, which is the response is over. We're going through the lessons learned, and now we're taking that as a way to prepare for the next wave. And we're going to start this time with our colleague from Azirec. Is it John again? So yep. John, over to you.
Thank you very much. So regarding the preparedness phase, like Florent said at the beginning, it's the word preparedness also can refer to the readiness phase, but here we're talking about, in this particular case, we're talking about the end of the emergency and to be ready for the future after that. So in terms of the processes that have been identified in terms of as far as Azirec is concerned, there's the recording the end of the emergency procedure. So the emergency procedure that is in the system will need to be declared as finished. Note that it also has the provision for not just terminating the procedure, but also extending the procedure if necessary. If the procedure is extended, then that means that the relief items and the operators will then therefore be allowed to continue to benefit from the facilitated procedures for the relief items defined. That, of course, is a decision that will be made based on what is happening in country. We mentioned before the whole aspect of communication, notification to the various actors in the border management and in this whole process, and there needs to be a proper indication and notification that the emergency procedure has been terminated. The difficulty at that point for customs and other agencies is that if goods are still being tried to be brought in or as relief items, then they will no longer benefit from the facilitated procedures, and that can be quite a bottleneck at that point. So it needs to be very carefully coordinated that the termination, people are aware of the termination, that, and if they do bring in goods after that, it will be subject to the regular taxation and other normal, let's say, normal procedures outside of an emergency phase. In terms of preparing for the future, there will need to be performance of post-clearance audit and assessment of humanitarian operators' compliance. In other words, to look at, there's several components here. One is the fact that the simplified declarations, some of them will need to be turned into consolidated declarations for the customs needs, and there also has to be some analysis to look at the operators, the goods that have been brought in, compliance of the operators, also the different consignments that have gone in for physical inspection and documentary check. Look for trends that might help identify goods that shouldn't have been coming in within this process in order to better prepare for future procedures. The NDMO and or customs will continue to update the list of priority items and eligible organizations as required, as this is a long-living dynamic process that continues basically forever. If we could move to the next slide before I go into the live aspect. Thank you. Looking at data, so basically what was said beforehand, all this is basically all data that needs to be managed, and ASIREC is part of that, along with the other systems that have been mentioned here today. So it's very important to report relief items. Obviously, thousands and thousands of kilos of packages and all kinds of stuff have come into the country, and now we have to look at what were the statistics that can be generated from the system, and how this can be used in other systems. One, transferred to other systems, and two, how it can be used for future reference. If I can just show you a couple of features from the system, I will share my screen. So here we come back to the emergency procedure. At this point, the relevant organization will need to either extend or terminate the emergency procedure. If we look at the actual document itself, the electronic document, there's an end date here. The termination process will simply just turn this document into a terminated status. However, if you extend, you therefore modify this end date accordingly, and that will extend the period to a much longer phase. What needs to be remembered at this point is that if you do extend, then the system will therefore apply this to the simplified declarations coming in and continue to accept certain items for certain operators under certain procedures. And if it's terminated, then of course that will no longer apply, and this is automatically done in the system. And one final point here is to mention, we mentioned numbers and analysis post-emergency. Here we can do a summary of what's going on during an actual emergency. This is the one for Madagascar. If we click on this button here, we get a bar charts of the different items that have been imported. So by hovering the mouse over each bar, we can see not only the description of the HS code, which is at the bottom, and its general information, but also what is remaining, how much is remaining of what is allowed, how much has been imported, how much is on the way, and this we have for each element. And of course, this is based on the fact that things have been declared in simplified declarations during the emergency process, and we can then therefore very easily extract this information and do a summary of the relief items for one particular emergency. And then those numbers can be very useful, not only for other systems, but for the rest of the community to be able to analyze what is left or what has been used and what is left and what can be done in the future. So I will hand back now to Florent, and that ends this part of the ASIREC. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, for that. It's very clear, I think. So as part of this last phase of the exercise, I'm handing back over to Martin to show us how the LogAI platform can be used in this phase. And then after that, I think it's going to be Giuseppe who takes over. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, so for the preparedness phase, basically the tool emerged from a preparedness project. And thanks to our donors, we were able basically here, beside providing a tool to preparedness countries where we're working in as the logistics cluster, to also really bring this tool on a let's say, operational level to be used in international emergencies. And coming back to preparedness for us, what we see most, let's say, the key challenge aside of how making tools talk to each other and what common data standards we can achieve and common operational data sets, the key challenge is really this is only as effective as it is used and useful. So for us in particular, and maybe Colonel Fall wants to also add to that, the biggest challenge is how can we really effectively support national stakeholders? Like, it looks nice, it is shiny and everything is great in terms of showcasing what it could do. But the question is really, how can we get to that point that national stakeholders can really effectively make use of it? And we see very often this is more the surroundings around it. How does it fit in an information process on the ground? How can stakeholders then access it? How can we ensure long-term sustainability? Trainings, introductions, learning from national stakeholders, how their information framework looks like, and how this can be embedded. That's why also LogAI is built as a building block system. So for us, the preparedness phase is really, let's say, the homework phase, so to say. We could technically switch on any emergency page within minutes. Our servers run these data sets on a global level, and they, like with OpenStreetMap and other big data providers, we have these synchronization routines. But at the same time, let's say the really relevant information, the situational information, that is very often out there, and it just takes a long time until it's available to the community. And here it is really about how can we improve this process? How can we support national stakeholders in utilizing these systems, having access to it? And yeah, very, very frank, quite often these are, how shall I say, like things that are not necessarily related to the technology, but more, do the people have access? Is everyone trained? How do we do rotations, language barriers, auto translation, I haven't mentioned before, happening in the background. And for us, these are the key lessons. And sometimes it's simple things like whatever, there's an Excel file shared around, but it's not machine readable. So maybe with some minor tweaks of the format, it can become machine readable. And then we can really turn a process that takes hours to update into minutes or seconds. And for us, that is mainly what happens throughout the preparedness phase. What we aim for and hope for is that in future, we have a better use of former emergencies. So for example, taking these tropical cyclones, and we really on a technical level can say, okay, this forecast looks very much like whatever cyclone 5 years ago, and that was the impact. So to overlay learnings and findings and scenarios from former emergencies. But to be frank, we're not there yet. We have the data, but we're not in the position and don't have the resources to bring that forward at the pace we would like to. And yeah, the integration at national level capacity strengthening activities, that is the key challenge. As long as it's not driven by national stakeholders and owned by national stakeholders, it very often risks just to be yet another tool. And as here the colleagues surely have to share the same about this process, it is long-term, it requires a lot of consultation. and it should be led by national government. So as we have here Colonel Fall, I don't know if you want to maybe share a bit of experience with LogAI in the past on that, because for us, this is the key driver in the preparedness phase. What do we have to have in place around it, from data sharing, over agreements, our access to our training, capacity strengthening, implementing it, embedding it, adapting it to national requirements. Yeah, that's where we are basically learning from the national stakeholders.
Ranel, I leave the floor to you if you want to respond to that.
Yes, thank you very much, Martin, for giving me the floor. Thank you, Florent. In fact, LogAI, our experience is quite positive, and even we've been very proactive in the process of implementing LogAI here in Madagascar. Because at the very beginning, at the very early phase of the project, we had a version of a brand new version of LogAI at that time, and starting from I think it was around 2017, 2019, and after the lesson learned of cyclonic season, during which we have utilized LogAI, we have given a kind of inputs and additional, let's say, lesson learned from the use of it, and then the global logistic cluster kindly updated also LogAI for the use of the NDMO. At that time, we were already involved in the way of looking for baseline, all the data that might be available and might be useful for the use of this LogAI system. And now we are on the process to formalize with the Ministry of Public Work, for example, to have a kind of database of roads here in Madagascar, so that we can easily update them during the disaster management that might happen here in Madagascar. This is one of the lessons learned, though, that we are on the process now to do the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, for the targeted ministry, the owner of data useful for the LogAI. The second one might be highlighted. The second thing that might be highlighted is now the what we call point kilometric. So it is a mark that is all along the road, national road, to say that we are now at kilometer number 1, kilometer number 2, and from the point A, the departure to the very end of this national road, there is every kilometers what we call point kilometric. So it is in the field. Now, one of the lessons learned that we have also see by the use of the difference between what is really in the field and then the database on the use of LogAI. And last year we have already say those kind of lessons learned to the global logistic cluster, and they kindly also support us to find solution in those kind of very pragmatic problem that we face on the use of the LOGAI. But those pragmatic problem leads to pragmatic also solution. So we really are very thankful for this good collaboration with Global Logistic Cluster on the use of LOGAI at this page, and we are very exciting to move forward for the next step, and maybe at the very end of this presentation, really I would like to advocate to do an advocacy if it's possible, really for us to move forward. And as the colleague asked a question at the chat, here in Madagascar, the BNGSA is really engaged to really lead those kind of projects, which is very useful for us, and we think that that can bring very huge added value for the way we manage disaster, and especially the aspect of relief emergency systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel, for this feedback. I will now leave the floor to our colleague from the International City, Mr. Giuseppe Saba will take over for this last phase, and then I will close that part about Stockholm after that. Giuseppe.
Thank you, Flora. Well, let me take my view on the lessons learned. First of all, what we just proved in the past couple of hours, more or less, is that digitalization can have somehow a positive impact on the humanitarian action. There is no doubt about this. But simultaneously, what we learned is that we cannot continue to keep, important and relevant tools, such as the Stockholm one, or the International Humanitarian City Logistics Data Bank, or the ASIRAC, just into silos, including, of course, the logistics clusters. So we need to start in connecting them. There is no doubt. That is the other lessons learned that I have from the past couple of hours. The other part is the fact that the presence of the NDMO is not an option, is a must. Whenever we want to discuss about preparedness, if we want to be really ready in the best way for responding to an emergency, we need to involve the NDMOs, the NDMAs. And if I may, because the idea started with Flora on this involvement of the NDMOs, I believe that next year we should start in bringing into the table also the regional entities. I'm referring to ECHO, I'm referring to AHA Center of ASEAN, I'm referring to ECOWAS, and so on. They must be part of this kind of exercise. And whenever we talk about the Humanitarian Logistics Data Bank, when we talk about Stockholm, we are still talking about information sharing. If today I have the luxury of showing you the Humanitarian Logistics Data Bank in Dubai, is because all the head of agencies, starting from the Director General of WHO, passing through the Executive Director of WFP, and so on, all of them agreed and signed a letter of intent in order to share this kind of information, including the Secretary General of IFRC, and so on. So means that there is a clear desire of sharing the information. And this is something that is not absolutely irrelevant. To get an idea that is my personal opinion again. If it's true that legally speaking, this information is in the ownership of the various stock owners, morally speaking, this is property of those countries that risk to be affected by natural disasters or complex emergencies. That is the reason why I will insist that they must be on board, especially if we want to talk about preparedness on national level and the local community. Those are not secret, absolutely. They are the ones who really are going to save life. We are coming a little bit from a few thousand kilometers far, so this we can complement their own efforts. I have a couple of questions. The simulation was clearly how to fill the gaps that were identified by looking into the Stockholm, okay. And we started in saying, okay, we should move from the closest humanitarian hub and so on, which is perfectly true. But then we have to ask ourselves if really our NDMO is really well satisfied, really if received what was expected, if those relief items are sustainable. So we have to start in thinking about this. If really for serving Madagascar, we went into Dubai or China instead of to serve Madagascar from Nairobi, because as has been underlined, we risk to increase our carbon emission, but the same is going to happen even for the replenishment. Did we apply, for example, options of loan and borrowing items among agencies? This morning, somebody was asking about this process and how, let me say, to get over the identification of the stock, the marking, and so on and so on. All of those aspects continue to be, let me say, in front of us, and we need to take care about them. We are approaching COP28. And again, also there is no doubt that whatever we used to call them natural disasters are mainly due to climate change, let's just be honest. And also there, how we can prepare ourselves in order to be, let me say, ready for this, for responding to this increase of emergencies due to natural disasters. Here we are talking about digitalization and use of artificial intelligence. Again, the artificial intelligence, I'm not going to enter into this topic because there is a colleague and friend that is supporting IHC on this and is going to explain to us much better than what I can do. But for sure, for us, it's extremely important to understand if across those 11 humanitarian hubs, which Jad was mentioning before, we are keeping the proper level of humanitarian stocks. This is where the artificial intelligence can help us. Predicting, this is another area where the artificial intelligence can help us. And next step, most probably, is also to talk about procurement. Do we should continue to do procurement in the traditional manner, or we should start in thinking about e-commerce, let me say, the electronic procurement that we can do in different manner? Do we continue to talk about standards of relief items, or is much better to start in thinking about regional exigencies and so on? This is kind of reflection. Sorry, I used to call them lessons learned, but this was a simulation. But this is something that I would like to continue to discuss with my colleagues. We started even recently in Dubai. We will continue to start in the next few days, but we would like to be in COP28 with clear, let me say, actions. We don't want absolutely to enter into COP28 with blah, 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 but let's shift from words into action. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for those words, Giuseppe, and then we'll come back on that in the closing remarks. I just wanted to keep the floor to show you what Stockholm is actually really built for as part of this preparedness phase. So you see on the screen, that's the Stockholm platform. You have in this section the stock mapping, which is what I showed you before, where you can see what stock exists by doing different parts of selection. You have the national disaster analysis, which is I showed you before. For each country, we've analyzed 40s of disaster, or we are in the process of going through the list of countries. My colleagues over there are working on that. The approach we have about this project is to give a capacity to national actors in country to define a prepositioning strategy of a collective nature. Giuseppe mentioned that very well. We need to start stepping out of our silo approach. So I'm doing my prepositionment because this is the way I've been doing it for 20 years and I have no idea what the others are doing, and we duplicate everything. We have no stock rotation, we have gaps, and we keep going as if it didn't matter. It does, because the resources are lesser and lesser, and unless we change the way we've been doing things, we will not be able to face what's coming with climate change, etc. So our approach is this one. We look at the stock available in country, which is the stock mapping you see on the screen. We look at the last 40 years of disaster into a country to have an idea about what the country is subject to in terms of disaster. There are different approaches. We've been mentioning before that some other initiatives are or will look into IA and forecasting rather than looking at what happened in the past. I think those two approaches are not antinomics, they are complementary. So we need to keep working on this together. What we've been doing is that with those two sets of information, the existing stock and the existing information on past disaster, we've been looking at a mathematical model developed by Penn State University and the MIT. And on the back of this model, which by definition is imperfect because it's a mathematical model, but we can provide some overview of the stock. So I'm looking at what we've been doing for Madagascar. And we've collected the stock from basically everybody with the support of the Lock Cluster Preparedness Initiative over there and the BNGRC, of course. The stock collected in country, as you can see here, the stock available in country allows Madagascar, if they were in a closed box with no external support to come, to support around 40% of the disaster affecting them, with an average disaster of 15,000 people. Of course, it's an average. If you look at Tana, the capital, you would have a higher capacity because there's more stock, because people keep more stock in the capital, and you would have a lower number in the provinces where there's less stock. But on average across the country can support disaster of around 15,000 people by themselves. Okay, keep this figure in mind because we're going to come back to that in a minute. Now, that gives you a capacity collectively to know where you stand, okay? Which is probably better than what you had before, where everybody was doing their stuff in their corner. You can do the same evaluation per item. So let's look at the kitchen sets. On a kitchen set capacity, your capacity in country is to support around half the disaster affecting the country. And again, we'll come back on this number in a minute to see how you can take that information and from there define a target you want to reach collectively. The second table underneath here is an evaluation of the location. So the first one is an evaluation of your quantities, and the second one is an evaluation of your location. So as you can see, you have a bit of room to improve, but the stocks of kitchen set currently in country are pretty much in the right location. Okay, and you have a third part here, which is giving you an idea of where you need to put your priorities. So you are the BNGRC, you bring your partners around the different clusters, shelter, wash, etc., and you want to know where should you start putting an effort to start saving cost and money. That's the same thing, time and money. So you can see in the three provinces, Savat, Diana, and Sofia, as long as you're going to start moving items here or from here, depending on the recommendation provided by the system, that's where you're going to start saving the most quickly and efficiently time and money. Okay, so that gives you an overview. As you can see, this tab is called National Level Overview. Give you an overview of where you stand collectively. Now, from that base on, you can start working on a collective strategy. And to do that, I'm going to show you how you can take this same approach at per item level. So we're going to take I'm going to stay in Madagascar, that's okay. So we keep the same item to have an idea. You look at your kitchen set. You look at the province of Mahanjaga we are looking at before. And now you see you were at 49%. And you say, okay, how can we collectively reach 75% of disaster in this province with our kitchen set? Okay, you have your shelter cluster sitting here. And here is what the information you get. The system will tell you that ideally, looking at the last 40 years of disaster, the level of stock of kitchen set in Mahanjaga should be close to 700. Okay. Currently, you collectively have around 150. You're missing 540. So we mentioned before, there's lots of other capacity to complement that. Before going to the international humanitarian city or other partner, UNHRDO, you can definitely look at your local markets and your local suppliers. Okay. So that's one way. The other way you can look at is if you have other warehouses into the country, again, collectively, that are overstocked. And it's very interesting because you do. So in this warehouse in the province of Morondava, the overall stock, sorry for the work in progress, that's something we need to clean, but the stock that should be kept in Morondava is around 110. The reason you have 2,200 is because nobody talked to each other. So you have a lot more kitchen sets there than you would actually need to support 40 years of disaster. So instead of bringing some more stock or going to the local market or put a truck on the road or whatever, those kind of information can be used to reallocate the stock to be collectively more prepared to respond to more disaster for lesser cost and a lesser time. Okay, so take those items from here, move them there, get to 700, reduce your overall quantity there, and you will have warehouses, facilities that are much more balanced. Okay, of course, you can see that there's other facilities that are in larger need, so you wouldn't have enough stock into the country, but it gives you an idea where you stand. In Madagascar, we only started the select percentage from 75%, but in Honduras and the other country, we started at 50 because sometimes it makes quite a big gap. The other information that you can get from that is that should the recommendation be implemented collectively, the potential time saving is around 8%, which is around 1 day per week in terms of response. The potential cost saving is around 30%, which, as you can see, start being quite significant. We are part of the next step. We are looking at developing an extra information here, which will be potential carbon emission saved by avoiding more plane and trucks and taking the one into consideration for the relocation of the goods in country. So what we're trying to demonstrate here is that sometimes we just don't need more. We just not need to do differently with what we already have. And more is not always a solution. I also want to mention that to resonate with what was mentioned by Giuseppe, and we call it a colleague we work with the UNHRD. At the moment, there's no pre-positioning strategy at national level, and Colonel can probably confirm that after that, but it's very difficult for anybody to know what the other are doing, and therefore to put a strategy in place considering what everybody else is doing. We don't have national pre-positioning strategies in place. They don't have regional pre-positioning strategies either. Okay, so the problem we face at national level are the same that they're facing at regional level. Hence, the reason also to start working together on those matters, because they can't be disconnected. What happened at regional level should be complementing what's needed at national level and vice versa. So we need to have those relationships established. I will stop here because I think that you can log on the ESOPS platform and find plenty of information, and there's many more things to show you, but that's not the point of this exercise. I will then move to the last part, which are the next step and the conclusion. So for Stockholm and the ESOPS project, there's a couple of things I want to mention. First, we have a sponsor by Gurobi, which is also supporting other platforms like the Logay platform and others. So in terms of integrating information, it will be actually make things much easier. And the project, for people who don't know, is hosted by Weltungerhilfe, and we have the director of the Humanitarian Directorate here, Norman, with us. The next step for the project, as we started to grow, I think if we look at the overall dashboard of the platform, you will see this right now live. We have, as of today, we have 220 users and we have 110 agencies on board, and I think we are present in around 40 countries. So some countries are much more advanced with many information. Some we just have one organization, but that's the idea. We try to roll the snowball and to bring more partners on board. So that's the reason also to engage with partners. That's what we're going to try to do. Encourage and support partners, government, INGO, NGO, UN, Red Cross to join this initiative. We're going to progress integration of the private sector. We've referred to that a few times. We know it's a very important element and it's a growing one. We need to find ways to include them into the platform, again, on the same ideas as the NDMO, when they try to have an overview of the capacities with the stock from the humanitarian partner, with the stock from the regional actors. They also have an overview of the private sector capabilities. So that's one thing we're going to start engaging with. We're going to finalize and multiply the APIs, the technical connection between the platform. So the ISC, the UNHRD, the LogAI platform, but also with existing warehouse management systems so that when you update your stock with what you receive yourself, you don't have to do double handling with also updating Stockholm. So anyone interested with a warehouse management system, we're happy to engage on that process. Finalize the development of a ponderation table, which is interesting. It's actually a system that was existing in Madagascar. And when I presented the Stockholm project there, they realized they had this in place. And we've agreed with the colonels that we would be allowed to steal it from them. So the idea is to develop a set of variables which will be informed, contextualized by the country. So something like the road access, which we discussed with LogAI, that will influence how you should preposition stock. If you have cash programming in country, that should influence how much stock you keep into the country. So all this information that we cannot build in at the global level, there will be an extra page on the platform, and people at national level will be able to inform that. Those extra variables will then fine-tune the overall finding we have with that on a contextualized basis, which will be different in Madagascar, in Honduras, in Fiji, and in other places. And finally, because that already started with the number of users, we started to collect feedback of people, of what they like, what they don't like, what are the information they would like to have access or the functionality. We not promise that we will develop all of them, but if we start having an aggregation of the same idea going forward, like we recently did from many of the Pacific Islander nations, we developed the functionality of a bulk upload, for instance, which allows you to put everything into Excel and then feed that into the platform, and then that's it, your stock is there. So there's quite a lot going, and of course, that will be along with the partnership with Direct, with the international city, with LogAI, and we're trying to make sure that we don't stay in our own silo and we keep working along with what the others are doing. So that's for Stockholm. IHC, next steps.
I will summarize 3-4 lines maximum. I would like to be back next year and present all together. Okay, really integrated tools. That is my next step, first one. I would love to see next year all primary actors around the table again, but including the regional ones, as I said before. And I hope to get the International Humanitarian City Logistics Data Bank expanded into other countries. Trust me, as mentioned by Jihad, is detecting customs transactions, means that we are dealing directly with the customs. We succeeded in Dubai, we succeeded with the government of Panama, we succeeded with the government of Italy. We are succeeding now with the government of Jordan and so on, but I hope that when we will come next year, we are going to bring you actions more than additional blah, blah. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I think we have the colleague from the artificial intelligence to ready online. but I think we'll just finish with ASIREC and LogAI on the next step, and then we'll move to that before the last few slides. ASIREC, on your next steps. John, sorry,
yes,
John, you're online.
Yes, I am. Could we just change the slide, perhaps? Yes. Excuse me. Yes, so very briefly then. So the next steps, actually now, we have a project in Vanuatu to implement ASIREC, which is ongoing. There have been a few delays due to the hacking incident around December and due to a natural disaster also in February this year. However, there was a relaunch last week, so we are ready to start our activities. This will hopefully be the, at least to a certain degree, the blueprint to be able to continue in other countries, or at least to be able to be in a better position to actually get further implementations on board. And this is actually the second point, is to continue the discussions with other interested NDMOs and other countries who are subject to such unfortunate disasters, to be able to implement ASIREC there as well. So as mentioned by our colleague Giuseppe, hopefully next year we'll talk about something that's actually been done, at least in Vanuatu. The third point has obviously been mentioned by all the partners, is that we need to find a way to establish interconnectivity between the systems. The systems are all very good, but they do need to talk to each other in a manner, and this is probably the next step, because first these systems have been developed, tested, hopefully being used as well, and now they need to go a step further and be interconnected in the right way at the right time, and to the benefit of those who are going to use them. Coming back to the Pacific region, we have a UNDA, that's United Nations Development Account regional project, where we bid for, and we were successful actually in getting a project for, if I can describe it that way, the spreading of the word, as it were, in the Pacific region, for regional seminars, for training material based on the Vanuatu experience, to be able to communicate that and use the experience for 13 other islands in the Pacific region. And those seminars and that material will be done in 2024 and 2025 as part of the UNDA cycle, which has a very concrete timetable set up for 2 years, actually 3, including the preparation this year. So these are the next steps that we have to get on with, and yes, there's work that needs to be done. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. And as you can see, within Stockholm, we have actually a lot of information of stock in Pacific. So happy to work with you on that if needed.
Agreed.
Martin, I leave the floor to you, and then we'll go with the quick presentation from the AI partner before closing the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Next slide, please. So on LogAI, we had mentioned already before, our main focus at the moment is this linkage, as mentioned before here by the colleagues. And for us, this is extremely fascinating, because there is established tools that are very powerful in their specific use case. And we are looking into ways how to just integrate these into the common operational picture. We were already with Stockholm underway on the API development, and are very much looking forward to have this done. ASIREC for us is a fascinating tool since long. As we are an operational tool unit, whenever there's a large-scale emergency, we have to basically attend to the emergency, and that might affect the timeline, but very much looking forward to also here follow up bilaterally and see there's a lot of very interesting, or let's say relevant and useful data beyond the custom purpose as well. Like the moment ASIREC has information about entry points, this information itself is already of very much use for us, so very much looking forward to it. The same with IHC. This is also a huge endeavor, and we are super curious to see how we can here establish a data link. That's our homework, so to say. And secondly, we are focusing on the improvements, what is, let's say, called usability, to make it even easier for users to fast access the information they're looking for. Our target audience, obviously, the logisticians in the humanitarian community. And that also goes along with better training and advocacy documentation. as this tool is developing that fast, it's hard to really maintain a good instruction training package. And we will, with even further focus, continue with the national stakeholders, from which we learned the most, to be honest, in terms of functionality and what is really useful. And yeah, so I totally agree with the colleagues here. As also Giuseppe mentioned, if we come back next year, to come back with results and having basically these ideas here to show in reality. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Martin, for that. So I will leave the floor to our colleague from the AI. I think they have a quick presentation. But in the same time, if anyone's willing to scan that QR code and start putting together a quick evaluation survey on the session, that would be very helpful. Do we have our colleague from Nibble in line, please?
Yes, I'm here, Franz. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect. I leave the floor to you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to just start out by saying, a really big thank you to Giuseppe and Jihad both for the invitation to be here. Listening to the colleagues speaking so far, I think I have been filled with opportunity. What we've seen so far, the efforts that have been taken in terms of digitalization of the humanitarian response is massive. And I hope, if I'm okay to share my screen now, the QR may disappear.
Let's go ahead.
Great. So I'm keen to show what we've done so far with IHC. A lot of the questions that have been asked may be answered here to a degree. So Nibble is an AI company you've mentioned a few times. We work in terms of science-based, data science-driven artificial intelligence. So a lot of this we don't need to go into. Obviously, we speak here on this slide about the need to be prepared. You have already spoken about this. You are the people who have kind of fed this kind of requirement to us. So understanding the awareness, education, preparedness, predicting, and having systems that can warn people to reduce the impact of natural disasters. And Giuseppe, I love, the frank way to say these are climate related. So it's very important that we understand what they are. We understand our role as an AI company is to basically support the humanitarian actors to build tools which are valuable. Data science is an amazing technology, artificial intelligence, amazing technology, and we've built a lot of really exciting technologies, but without input from IHC and the stakeholders, we wouldn't have been able to produce anything of value. And we've heard that repeated throughout the session today. So without getting stuck on this slide, this project was fueled by IHC's data. We had historical data. It's important to mention that because as we start to feed more data into the system, the predictions will become more and more accurate, and they will become more and more valuable. So what we've been able to demonstrate is development of AI models within the context that you have been speaking about, which is a cyclone event in Madagascar. So what we did, we took essentially the last 5 years of IHC data, which was shared, and we are now able to predict the total worth or the value in USD of aid, the total weight of that aid, and the total number of items which we predict will be required for any region, all the way down to a country. Now, it's worth pointing out that this doesn't apply to any type of calamity. We've been focused on cyclones, and as you've already mentioned as a group, the ability to predict this in terms of seasonality is becoming less. It's becoming less possible to predict this, but via the data science, we have very, very high accuracy in terms of what we've been able to demonstrate. So looking at specific subregions, breaking it down to specific months, and down to specific product clusters. what we've been able to do is also then describe a proportionate projection. So we're able to estimate the value of aid, its weight, and the number of items for each group of products under a specific product cluster. Obviously, the long-term requirement here is to be able to compare what we forecast in terms of demand with what we've seen in the existing systems that show current stock, so that we can find those gaps and then act in enough time to be able to reduce suffering. So this is one of the areas where we decided to investigate further. We saw strong correlation. The relationships here between the number of subregions and aggregated aid value was clear against the value versus the months, and also the value versus subregions. So again, this didn't give us insight, but it gave us a good indication as to where we should start focusing. Many times we went back and forth with the stakeholders, and they said, this is not really a useful insight. So there is a huge amount of work that needs to be done with the stakeholders so that we can make sure that what we're developing is truly valuable to the people on the ground. So again, big thanks to IHC, Jihad, and the team there. What we did is basically take the data on the left-hand side of this. We took the calamity types, the subregions, the month, and the product clusters from every single waybill that we were able to then feed into the machine learning models that Nibble has, proprietary models. And we were able to develop 3 ML models. And as we targeted, we are able to predict the total value, total weight, and the number of each type of item. Again, this is valuable for many different reasons, but we've looked at it within a very specific context. To give you an idea in terms of the accuracy of the models, the scores in terms of R² is 0.9 when we look at weight and value, and 0.8 in terms of quantity. So there's a little bit of larger variance in terms of the actual number of items, but when you look at the predicted value versus the actual value in terms of dollars for the aid, this is within a specific region, broken down into product cluster in this table. You can see that the predicted values are pretty close. Now, given that we have a limited amount of data coming in at this point, there is a tendency for models, ML models, to overfit, and this will improve over time as we're able to give additional data into the system. And of course, there is a bias towards where the regional hubs are. This is the data from the UAE hub. So as we integrate further data sets, we can be more and more confident in terms of the projections. So taking the predicted values, so when we look at the actual dollar value, we look at the predicted weight and the predicted numbers of items, we're able to then think many different ways on how we can use that data when we predict the emergence of an emergency. So looking at the context of the scenario which was given, we went down into the Eastern Africa, and we looked specifically, for example, at health in terms of the product cluster. So we made a projection in terms of the dollar value of that aid, and that can then be broken down further into medical items, pharmaceutical, safety, and security. And these projections are based on those same models. Of course, the same is done for the weight. We break it down into where we believe that will go. And again, in terms of the items, the number of them, this is the one with the lowest accuracy, but still 80% is pretty significant when you look at the ability to be ready in advance. Again, the idea is to then compare what we have in stock currently versus what you predict will be needed. So, of course, when you look at the IHC stock and you compare that to a calamity that we've seen, the stock doesn't, there is no gap, there is no shortage at this point, because the particular calamity that we looked at was very small. That said, when you integrate further data sets and you aggregate more and more product items, you will start to see that percentages of sub-hubs or hubs across the world, you will start to see that there is a shortage. And this is where you have the opportunity to act in advance. When we have that prediction, this can be done a year in advance. So you have plenty of time to act and close those gaps. So for example, if we had looked at the closer hub, which may not have had similar stock levels, you could have seen that there was shortage. But again, that's about being able to integrate further detail, further data sets from wider stakeholders. Now, we took the projection into something that we can act upon today. And the context that we looked at was emissions, and we've heard it a few times during the session today. Being able to take those models, predict the demand in that particular emergency, we were able to then calculate the emissions associated with any waybill. Based on the prediction, we were then able to associate how many emissions would be allocated for each item. Given the data we've already got, we've been able to show exactly what emissions have been allocated to each partner agency and down to each region or country. Now, this gives us 4 quick opportunities. And the actions that we can follow right now is basically we can start very quickly and transparently report emissions associated with the logistics element of this humanitarian activity. This can be done at each hub where we get data. Obviously, then when you have those data sets and we're able to then build the trends, we can see whether a hub is becoming more or less efficient, a supplier is becoming more or less efficient, and then we can start giving insight as to where you may be able to reduce emissions. And that's important to all the stakeholders, because at the end of the day, what we're looking at in this context is improving the sustainability long-term of that humanitarian aid. And so then the last part here is to be able to then share partner agencies allocations to be able to actually avoid or abate those emissions. So again, very similar to what you've talked about in the humanitarian context, this is kind of drilling down into the emissions space. Of course, the projection can be applied in any context, given what the stakeholders are asking for. Now, if we look down at specific products, just as an example, on the left-hand side, you have the average emissions for all waybills that are associated to each product item. Now, this is for the last 4 years. And obviously, this gives you the opportunity to identify long-term sustainability indicators. So if this in the next 4 years goes up or down for a specific product, this is an opportunity for us to go back and give advice to the stakeholders to be able to reduce or improve this. Again, on the right-hand side, you have the last 12 months worth of emissions based on each of the partner agencies. So again, being able to quickly give that to the agencies who all have their own efforts to monitor, manage, and reduce their emissions, this is really valuable information for them. But of course, we talked about connecting systems. So being able to take the current systems and take this data and feed it back to the actors, it's a great opportunity to reduce emissions. And again, this can be built for many different spaces and contexts. If you look again, to be able to share the emissions associated with waybills from a specific country, a lot of this, we expect this given the size of shipments. But also when you look at destinations, you can look at whether these trends are going up or trends are going down. Are the efficiencies going up or down? And this is an opportunity to improve sustainability immediately, but obviously for the long term. So again, in terms of what we've heard several times, being able to integrate more and more data sets is really important. Again, we have a bias here from the Dubai, the UAE hub, because that's where the data came from. But as we're able to integrate more and more hubs data sets, we can actually benchmark the emission efficiency of each hub. And that comes down to each hub in terms of items, whether it's a specific item being delivered to a specific destination, or if we want to highlight, as we've already heard about, which is going to be the most cost efficient, we can also talk about it in terms of which is the most efficient in terms of emissions. So there's several upshots for the same data sets, being able to analyze those data sets and feed it back to the right stakeholders. Now, this could be someone in procurement, planning, logistics, or management. It's valuable for different reasons. So it's important that, you know, those conversations continue. But the modeling that we have already is able to give the emissions for a given region. We're able to identify opportunities to reduce emissions through early action because of the projection. And it gives you the opportunity to leverage better, and we've heard this already, but leverage better partnerships. So being able to reach out to specific agencies who have access to aid closer. And again, the way this is possible is by having access to data and effectively sharing it. But also it gives agencies the opportunity to align those forecasts with their budgets in terms of emission reduction, whether it's about abatement or, you know, just changing their actions. And this all comes back to aligning towards a lower carbon future. So looking at the objective of reducing emissions, when we look at the specific context, which was the scenario that was presented, if you look at Madagascar as this example, if we were able to avoid the air freight because of the fact that we were able to project the aid. Now, we've taken the aid for each of these countries, and this is based on the projection that we were able to do, let's say, a year in advance. We can avoid shipping that in an emergency through air freight. You can see the emissions on the left-hand side. We take that and we rather take time, do it via sea freight. You can see that the emissions are lower in orders of magnitude. So that is real impact today. There's no need to wait for that impact. We can see that immediately. Now, of course, when you are more prepared, when you're able to do this in less of an emergency context, you're able to reduce the emissions. But of course, there's other very important impacts, whether it's cost, whether it's, you know, humanitarian aid being where it needs to be. You guys are the experts in this context. So I'm sure the argument for doing the projection is not lost here. What we're doing, what we believe in terms of the impact of this ML and AI, you know, just in this single context, this small project that we're doing, and we're very thankful to be involved in it, you know, we're looking really at promoting resilience. We're being able to deliver water, food, housing, health, social equity, everything. And for us, this is really, really important. And it is a big part of why we are driving this technology, because of the fact we see that these are large global demands. And you know, we believe that it's technologies like this that are needed to be able to meet the large requirements that the world has moving forward. So if there's any questions, we'd be glad to answer.
Thank you for that presentation. That's definitely really interesting. We can see that the potential is massive. I think it's important, I mean, from everything that was presented today and in the last presentation, I think that comes down to two important things. The first thing is to have the data. All those machines and those systems are only as good as the data they're being fed. And I think that in order to access the data, we all need to change our mindset and to take an approach which is a more collaborative approach, which requires more trust, which was also a point mentioned in the discussion this morning. Which also implies that we need to let go, as was written in a very famous report before. We need to let go, and we need to accept of being a bit more dependent from the others. And I think that will take a long time, but I think we're on the right track for that. So before I leave the floor for Q&As, I know we are running late, so sorry for that. Here is the QR code for those who wouldn't have had time to fill that up. And I just would like to take a few questions, if any. Do we have any in the chat, Sophia? For either for the presentation that was just done by Nivel or for the general presentation?
Yes, there was a question on the HS codes. In two parts. Number one, are field disaster assessors happy and able to use HS codes? Are they sufficiently granular to identify all relief goods? And the second part is asking if the fact that Stockholm, the humanitarian city, and Azirek appear to have the 6-digit HS and Madagascar's were showing 8 digits. So are the customs prepared to use the 6-digit for simplified declarations? I hope that's clear. I can repeat part of it if not.
It's a Chinese to me, but I'm sure Kosti will have all the answers to that.
Thank you for the question. There is a need to supply that information. It's not that HS6 is sufficient or not. It's required by customs legislation, at least for pre-departure and pre-arrival information, but also for simplifications as we proposed here. And we proposed several types of simplification. One is using a customs declaration with a reduced data set. It's around 1/3 of the data elements that are normally required by customs, but also using a commodity code at 6-digit level. So I would say I would make a parallel with what happens today, and there is a trend in e-commerce now to use what they call super reduced data set and an HS code, which is common at the international level, so 6-digit code. Is it sufficient enough to declare the goods? In times of emergency, I would say yes. It's very accurate, of course not. This is also the reason why countries are implementing a 10 or 11-digit code. However, the combination of a product ID and the HS code would be sufficient to create this kind of database in which you can uniquely identify those goods. So again, it's part of the simplification process, and it's a requirement to be able to integrate the three systems. And we spoke here about the need to integrate systems, and we highlighted that this integration is not for the benefit of a particular tool. It's bidirectional, yes? So we said that before the emergency is being declared, information from Stockholm is used in Azirek as to see which kind of relief items are being still required. They are not available in the country. That information is made available to IHC database. And vice versa. Once a movement starts from IHC, is being reused in Azirek during the clearance process, but also upon completion of the clearance process, the information from Azirek is passed back to Stockholm, because from the entry point, from the clearance point, the goods are moving into the respective distribution warehouses, national, regional, or local ones. So we have to use a unique identifier for the respective relief items. And the most appropriate one is the HS code today. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy, for that. Was there anything else, Sophia?
Yes, just a comment by Zarina. I don't know if she's still with us, but the comment has been partly addressed by Colonel Fali. She was highlighting that the tools are pretty good and useful. However, without NDMO engagement in data sharing and the sense of responsibility and ownership, the tools cannot be socialized. So I just wanted to highlight that. And maybe one more question from Katarina. I also don't know if she's still with us because we are a little bit late, but I'm still going to read it out. If we are planning to add the disaster forecasting and the Stockholm platform, if we already know how are we going to do that, and for example, if one of the plan is to link it to the Inform modules. So these are the two questions for now.
Okay, so the answer is no. We are not planning to integrate the forecast in the Stockholm platform. The approach we have is that we filling the information on one specific gap, which was what is the stock available at country level. There's plenty of others, including Martin, the LogAI platform, or what others are doing that much better than we do. So we will rely on them. That's part of the trust and the collaboration aspect. We will share the data we have with them for them to do this analysis and do this forecasting model, etc. So when it comes to Stockholm, we will continue exclusively focusing on mapping the stock available at national level. We won't map the transport. LogAI is doing that, so we can integrate. We won't map the port or the airport. They're doing that with the LCA. We can integrate. We don't need to overload our platform for that. And similarly for the forecast and projection of disaster, we've seen existing models that are being put in place or others that are thinking about it. So we will integrate what we have with what others are better than us at developing rather than duplicating. Okay. It's starting being late, so I'm just going to leave the floor for last word to Colonel Fali, and then that's it? Okay, so Colonel Fali, I leave the floor to you for closing the session, if you have any last remarks, and I take the opportunity to thank all of you for coming to the session today, attending online. And of course, you are much welcome to contact any of us after that for any follow-up or question. Colonel Fali, I leave it the closing to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Florent, for giving me the floor. Once again, a very thank you and warm thank you for all the presentators and all the attendees of this meeting. It was very enriching sharing information. I hope that all of the proposition, all of the ideas that has been explained and exposed, presented by all of the presenters, all of the question also of the participant can be taken into consideration and will be, as one of the colleagues said, going from words to action. So as part of the National Disaster Management Authority here in Madagascar, we are really very thankful for all of this. And we are open to be part of the next step. So one of the next steps that we can propose to you is to organize a bilateral or multilateral meeting in which we can see all together how can move forward also for this in Madagascar. And by taking into consideration all the steps of advocacies and then authorization from your side. But in any case, thank you very much. And on behalf of our General Director of BNGRC here, I would like really to say to you, if it's possible, to come to Madagascar to implement some of the steps so that we can make it real, that next year we can really present something very ongoing in the next rendezvous in Geneva. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Colonel. We'll leave it here. Thank you, everyone.